My wife's father invited me to a fancy family dinner with all my relatives. Then my wife's dad stood up and announced to everyone, "We've decided to cut you out of the company's operation. You've never deserved it." Everyone laughed and agreed. "Dave, your wife's new partner will replace you." I smiled, took a sip, and quietly left 2 days later. Complete family chaos. My name's Daniel Price, and if you're reading this thinking it's some kind of inspirational success story, buckle up, Buttercup, because you're about to be disappointed faster than a kid finding out Santa's just their drunk uncle in a rental costume. I'm 34 years old, which apparently is the perfect age to have a midlife crisis, a failing marriage, and a father-in-law who thinks he's the second coming of Warren Buffett if Warren Buffett had the personality of a tax audit and the charm of a parking ticket. For the past 7 years, I've been the chief operating officer of Harrington Global Holdings, which is a fancy way of saying I've been the guy who actually does all the work while a bunch of trust fund babies take credit for it at country club brunches. It's a family-owned real estate empire. And when I say empire, I mean the kind of business that makes money by convincing people that a 2-bedroom apartment with a view of a dumpster is a luxury urban experience. The whole operation is run by Richard Harrington, my delightful father-in-law, a man so convinced of his own brilliance that I'm pretty sure he thinks God personally calls him every morning for financial advice. Spoiler alert, if God's giving Richard investment tips, the Almighty needs to fire his broker. When Richard invited me to what he called a special family dinner, I actually thought, and yes, I know how stupid this sounds in retrospect, that maybe, just maybe, he was finally ready to discuss succession plans. You know, like a normal functioning family business would do. After all, I'd worked like a dog for 7 years straight, the kind of hours that would make sweatshop workers send me sympathy cards. I doubled the company's profits, streamlined operations that were messier than a toddler's art project, and personally bailed his golden boy son Greg out of not 1, not 2, but 3 catastrophically failed startups that burned through cash faster than a barbecue pit on the 4th of July. One of Greg's genius ideas was a subscription service for artisanal ice cubes. Ice cubes. I wish I was making this up. My wife Sabrina, bless her cold, calculating heart, said it would be a classy evening, which should have been my first red flag because Sabrina's definition of classy usually involves maximum drama and minimum empathy. She wore her favorite diamond bracelet to the dinner, the obscenely expensive one she calls motivation for marriage, which I'm pretty sure translates to the reason I tolerate you. I wore my best suit, the sharp navy one that actually fits properly, the one I bought myself because Richard believed, and I quote, that a son-in-law didn't deserve wardrobe stipends. Apparently, marrying his daughter and saving his company from bankruptcy twice didn't qualify me for the executive clothing allowance. But hey, at least I got invited to Thanksgiving, right? Lucky me. As we pulled up to the Grand Magnolia, this ridiculously overpriced restaurant where appetizers cost more than most people's car payments, I had that eerie, unsettling feeling you get right before a horror movie starts. You know what I'm talking about? That false sense of calm. The pleasant background music playing while someone's about to get murdered holding a cocktail and wearing expensive shoes. The valet took our car with that professionally fake smile that rich people pay extra for, and Sabrina checked her makeup in her compact mirror like she was preparing for a photo shoot instead of a family dinner. Should have known something was up when she reapplied her lipstick 3 times. That's war paint, not dinner prep. The restaurant itself looked like someone had asked an interior designer, what would happen if Versailles and a Vegas casino had a baby, and then given them an unlimited budget and a cocaine problem. Everything was gold, cream, or crystal, the kind of place where even the napkins judge you. The host led us through the main dining room, past tables full of people who definitely had financial advisors and summer homes, toward a private room in the back that probably cost more to reserve than my first car. I should mention here that I'm not stupid. Well, clearly I was stupid enough to marry into this family and think I could earn their respect through hard work and competence, so maybe I am stupid, but I'm not usually this stupid. Something felt off the moment we walked into that private dining room. Maybe it was the way everyone stopped talking when I entered. Maybe it was how Sabrina's grip on my arm tightened just slightly, like she was either nervous or trying to keep me from escaping. Maybe it was the fact that her brother Greg couldn't make eye contact with me and suddenly found his bread plate fascinating. Or maybe, just maybe, it was because sitting at the table, grinning like he'd just won the lottery and slept with my wife. Which, spoiler alert for later chapters, he probably did, was Mark. Mark, Sabrina's ex-boyfriend from college. Mark, who somehow still got invited to every single Harrington family event like he was an honorary member. Mark, who worked in cryptocurrency consulting, which is just a fancy way of saying he convinced idiots to give him money for digital coins that don't actually exist. Mark, who wore too much cologne and had one of those faces that just screamed, "I've never experienced consequences for my actions." The seating arrangement should have been another clue. I was positioned at the table like a defendant at trial, with Richard at the head looking like a judge, Sabrina to my right looking like a prosecutor's witness, and the rest of the family spread around like a jury that had already decided I was guilty. Guilty of what? I wasn't sure yet, but I was about to find out. A waiter in white gloves, seriously, white gloves, like he was handling evidence at a crime scene, poured wine that probably cost more per glass than my weekly grocery bill. Everyone made small talk, that awful kind of forced conversation where people ask about your weekend but don't actually care about the answer. Greg mentioned something about golf. An aunt I'd met twice discussed her Pilates instructor. Uncle Raymond complained about capital gains taxes like it was a personal attack from the IRS specifically targeting him. And through it all, Richard sat there at the head of the table with this smile, this knowing, satisfied smile that made my stomach drop like I'd just crested the top of a roller coaster. He kept glancing at Mark, then at Sabrina, then at me, like he was mentally editing a movie and couldn't wait for his favorite scene. Dinner was served. Some kind of fancy steak that was probably grass-fed, organically raised, and given daily massages before slaughter, and I tried to eat while ignoring the growing sense of dread sitting in my chest like indigestion. Sabrina made small talk about a charity gala she was planning, the kind of event where rich people pay $1,000 for chicken to feel good about themselves. Mark laughed too loudly at everything Richard said. Greg pushed food around his plate like a kid avoiding vegetables. And me? I sat there cutting my steak, drinking overpriced wine, and waiting for whatever bomb was about to drop. Because that's what this was. I could feel it. This wasn't a family dinner. This was an execution, and I was the guest of honor. The condemned man at his own funeral, except I was still breathing and nobody had told me I was already dead. The conversation continued around me, empty and performative, and I realized with sudden, crystal clarity that I'd been invited here not for succession planning or recognition or any kind of good news. I'd been invited here for something else entirely. Something that would explain why Sabrina had been distant for weeks. Something that would explain those hushed phone calls she'd been taking in the other room. Something that would explain why Richard kept looking at me like I was a problem he'd finally figured out how to solve. I took another sip of wine, smiled politely at whatever boring story Uncle Raymond was telling about real estate zoning laws, and prepared myself for whatever was coming. Because whatever it was going to be bad. Really bad. The kind of bad that changes everything. And judging by the look on Richard's face as he prepared to stand up with his wine glass, the kind of bad that they thought would destroy me completely. The dining room looked like money had violently exploded all over every surface, like some billionaire had sneezed wealth and nobody bothered to clean it up. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like expensive spider webs, each one probably worth more than a decent sedan, casting this weird golden glow that made everyone look either angelic or jaundiced, depending on how much you liked them. The walls were covered in gold trim that screamed, "We have more money than taste," and the carpet was so plush you could probably lose small children in it. The waiters moved around in white gloves so pristine they could perform open-heart surgery between serving courses, and honestly, given the way this evening was going, I wouldn't have been surprised if someone needed medical attention before dessert. Every single relative was there, and I mean every single one. Uncles I'd only seen at weddings and funerals. Aunts who'd never remembered my name correctly and still called me David or Derek. Cousins who worked in finance, which usually meant they managed their trust funds and called it a career. Even Sabrina's grandmother was there, the ancient one who smelled like mothballs and disappointment, sitting in the corner like the ghost of Christmas past judging everyone's life choices. And of course, sitting there like he owned the place, was the family's favorite pet, Mark, Sabrina's smug ex-boyfriend, who somehow still got invited to everything like he was an official family member instead of a walking red flag wrapped in expensive cologne and unearned confidence. I was about halfway through my steak, trying to focus on the food because it was literally the only good thing about this evening. When Richard stood up, he moved slowly, deliberately, like a villain in a movie who's been waiting his whole life for this moment. He raised his wine glass high enough that the chandelier light hit it just right, making it sparkle like he was holding a tiny sun, and his grin was wide enough to hide every sin he'd ever committed, which, knowing Richard, was a lot. The entire table went quiet, that awful kind of silence where you can hear people breathing and the scrape of a fork sounds like a car crash. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice booming with that fake warmth that rich people use when they're about to screw someone over, "we've made a very important decision about the future of Harrington Global Holdings." He paused for dramatic effect, because of course he did. Richard loved drama more than he loved profit margins, and that's saying something. "We've decided to cut Daniel out of company operations entirely. He's simply not what the firm needs anymore. His services, while appreciated in the past, are no longer required." Silence. Complete, total, suffocating silence. You could have heard a stock price drop. I sat there, fork frozen halfway to my mouth, steak juice probably dripping onto my expensive tie, trying to process what I'd just heard. And then, like someone had pressed play on the world's worst comedy show, came the laughter. Not uncomfortable, nervous laughter. Not awkward, don't know how to react laughter. No, this was genuine, delighted. We've been waiting for this laughter. My brother-in-law Greg literally started clapping like he'd just witnessed the season finale of his favorite show, and his favorite character finally got killed off. His hands came together in slow, deliberate applause, and that smirk on his face made me want to introduce his teeth to the dinner table. Mark, that cologne-soaked parasite, smirked so hard I thought his face might crack. "Guess that means there's an opening for a new COO, huh?" He said it casually, like he was asking about the weather, but his eyes were sparkling with something that looked an awful lot like victory. The audacity of this guy, this crypto bro who couldn't manage a lemonade stand without somehow losing money and creating an NFT about it, suggesting he could step into my role. Richard actually winked at him. Winked, like they were sharing some inside joke that I was the punchline of. "Close, son," he said, and the fact that he called Mark son made my blood pressure spike so hard I probably could have powered a small city. "We've decided that Sabrina's business partner will be taking over operations instead. Fresh perspective, family values, someone we can really trust." Sabrina's business partner? I turned to look at my wife, this woman I'd been married to for 7 years, the woman I'd worked myself half to death for, the woman who was currently sipping her wine like she was a movie villain in slow motion, all calculated elegance and zero remorse. Our eyes met for just a second, and I saw absolutely nothing there. No guilt, no apology, no hint of the woman I thought I'd married. Just cold, pure calculation. "Don't make a scene," she whispered to me, leaning in close enough that only I could hear. Her breath smelled like expensive wine and betrayal. Her diamond bracelet, the motivation for marriage bracelet, caught the light and practically blinded me with its irony. I smiled. I actually smiled, because what else are you going to do when your entire life implodes at a dinner party? Cry? Beg? Flip the table over like some kind of reality TV star? Nah. I smiled so wide my face hurt, the kind of smile that probably scared everyone more than yelling would have. "Scene?" I said, loud enough for the whole table to hear. "Oh no, sweetheart, I would never make a scene. This is top-tier theater right here. Broadway quality. Please, by all means, continue. Don't let me interrupt the performance." The table shifted uncomfortably. A few of the aunts exchanged glances. Uncle Raymond coughed into his napkin. But Richard, that magnificent bastard, he just kept going. He raised his glass higher and launched into this whole speech about family loyalty and new leadership direction and the next generation of Harrington success. Every word was a knife, and he was really enjoying the stabbing. The family nodded along like trained seals, murmuring their approval, raising their glasses. Greg was still smirking. Mark was practically glowing. Sabrina maintained her ice queen composure, not looking at me, just staring straight ahead like I was already gone. Everyone laughed like hyenas at Richard's jokes, those awful forced laughs that rich people do when someone powerful says something that isn't actually funny. And you know what? I joined in. I laughed too, but my laughter was different. It was calm, controlled, the kind of laugh that comes from a place of absolute clarity. The kind of laugh that says, "I know something you don't know." The kind of laugh that apparently scared them because I noticed a few people stop laughing and just stare at me with confused concern. "Wonderful speech, Richard," I said, raising my glass and clinking it deliberately against Mark's crystal goblet. The sound rang out clear and sharp, like a bell tolling. Really inspiring stuff. Truly moving. Just one small note for future reference. Next time you stab someone, aim for the chest. The back's getting a little crowded at this point. Mark's smirk faltered just slightly. Good. I stood up slowly, deliberately, taking my time to adjust my tie and smooth down my suit jacket. Every eye in the room was on me, waiting to see if I'd explode, if I'd yell, if I'd beg for my job back like some pathetic middle manager getting downsized. "Well," I said, surveying the room like a general surveying a battlefield he was about to abandon. "Congratulations to everyone involved in this touching family moment. Really, I'm honored to have been included in my own professional execution. It's not every day you get fired by family in front of 50 witnesses. This is the kind of memory that really stays with you." I picked up my wine glass and took one last sip of that overpriced burgundy. "I'll see you all at the bankruptcy meeting," I said casually, like I was mentioning the weather. Then I set my glass down with a gentle clink, turned on my heel, and walked toward the door. Every step felt powerful, deliberate. Behind me, I could hear confused murmurs, people trying to process what I'd just said. Bankruptcy meeting? What did he mean? Was that a threat? I didn't look back. Looking back is for people who have regrets, and right now, walking out of that room full of vipers and trust fund vampires, I had exactly zero regrets. The door closed behind me with a satisfying thud, muffling the rising voices and confusion I'd left in my wake. Outside in the main restaurant, normal people were having normal dinners, completely unaware that someone's entire life had just detonated in the private room. The valet, the same professionally cheerful guy from earlier, approached with my ticket. "Good evening, sir," he said with that customer service smile. "How was your dinner this evening?" I looked at him, this innocent kid who had no idea what he was asking, and I couldn't help but laugh. "Fantastic," I told him, handing over my ticket. "Absolutely fantastic. I just got fired by my wife's family in front of 50 witnesses at a restaurant that charges $40 for an appetizer. Can't wait to write the Yelp review. 5 stars for theatrical ambushes, 0 stars for human decency. Really, it was an experience I'll never forget." The valet's smile froze in that confused way that happens when someone says something that sounds like a joke, but clearly isn't. He nodded awkwardly and hurried off to get my car, probably wondering if he should call security or a therapist. I stood there under the restaurant's elaborate entrance awning, breathing in the cool night air, feeling strangely calm for someone whose life had just imploded. My car pulled up, and I tipped the valet $20 because why not? It wasn't like I'd need to save money for the Harrington family Christmas presents anymore. You know what's funny about betrayal? And I mean genuinely, cosmically hilarious? It's that moment when everything clicks into place, when all those little weird moments over the past few months suddenly make perfect sense, like finding the last piece of a jigsaw puzzle under the couch and realizing the picture was of you getting screwed over the entire time. As I drove home from the Grand Magnolia, passing through streets lined with overpriced boutiques and restaurants I could no longer afford to eat at on principle, my brain started connecting dots faster than a conspiracy theorist on too much coffee. Those hushed phone calls Sabrina had been taking in the bathroom? Not her mother. Those late nights at the office that started 3 months ago? Yeah, there was an office involved, but probably not in the way she described. That weekend trip she took with Mark to discuss business opportunities? I'd actually believed that. I'd actually sat at home with Milton the cat, eating takeout Chinese food and watching basketball, thinking my wife was out there securing our financial future. What a chump. What an absolute, grade A, premium quality chump. The thing about Richard's toast that really got me, the part that kept replaying in my head like a bad song you can't stop humming, was how planned it all was. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment decision announced at dinner. No, this was orchestrated, rehearsed, probably focus grouped with the family over Sunday brunch. They'd all known. Every single person at that table had known what was coming except me. I was the only one not in on the joke, the only one who thought we were actually having a family dinner instead of attending my professional funeral. I pulled into the driveway of the house I'd bought. Well, technically the house Sabrina had picked out and I'd paid for, and just sat there for a minute in the car with the engine running. The house looked perfect from the outside. All neat landscaping and expensive exterior lighting. The kind of home that screams, successful people live here. What a lie that was. Successful people. I'd spent 7 years building someone else's empire while my own life crumbled like a cookie in a toddler's fist. Inside, Milton greeted me with his usual enthusiasm, which is to say he completely ignored me. That cat has never been excited to see me a single day in his life, and honestly, I respect that. At least Milton's honest about not caring. He was sitting on the back of the couch, licking his paw and giving me that look cats give you that says, "You're late with dinner, and I'm judging your entire existence." I poured myself 3 fingers of whiskey, the good stuff, the bottle I'd been saving for a special occasion. And hey, getting fired by your in-laws seems special enough. And collapsed onto the couch next to my emotionally unavailable feline roommate. "Milton," I said, raising my glass to the cat. "I just got fired at a fancy dinner party. Your thoughts?" Milton yawned, which felt like appropriate commentary on my life choices. Yeah, that's what I thought too. I took a long drink and let the whiskey burn its way down my throat, warming me from the inside while my entire outside life fell apart. I replayed the dinner in my head again, this time without the shock clouding my judgment, and started to notice things I'd missed in the moment. The way Greg wouldn't look at me when I first arrived, that wasn't guilt. That was excitement he was trying to hide. The way Aunt Patricia kept glancing at her watch like she was waiting for something to happen. The way Uncle Raymond had positioned himself near the door like he thought I might need to be physically removed. They'd all been waiting for the show. I was the entertainment, the main event, the reason everyone had actually shown up to this dinner. Daniel Price gets what he deserves, live and in person, dinner included. And Mark. Oh, Mark. That smug, cologne-drenched parasite had been sitting there the whole time knowing he was about to take my job, my position, my 7 years of grinding work, and probably sleeping with my wife while he was at it. The more I thought about it, the more obvious it became. Sabrina's business partner. Right. Because Sabrina had never shown any interest in actually working at Harrington Global before, but suddenly she had a partner who was conveniently her ex-boyfriend, and they were taking over operations together. Real subtle, guys. Really subtle. I finished my drink and poured another one, because why not? It's not like I had to wake up early for work anymore. I was officially unemployed, cut loose from the family business like a bad investment, 7 years of loyalty and doubled profits thrown out like yesterday's trash. But here's the thing they didn't know, the beautiful, perfect thing that made me smile into my whiskey glass like a maniac plotting revenge in a movie. I still had access to everything. See, while Richard was busy playing golf and Mark was busy being useless, I was the one who actually built the infrastructure that kept Harrington Global running. I designed the financial systems. I set up the payroll software. I organized the digital filing system for every contract, every deal, every slightly questionable business decision Richard had made over the past 7 years. And because I'm thorough, some might say paranoid, I prefer prepared. I'd backed everything up. Call it insurance. Call it foresight. Call it the survival instinct of a man who always knew, deep down, that working for family was going to bite him eventually. On my laptop, sitting innocently in a folder I'd labeled Vacation Photos 2023, because nobody ever looks at other people's vacation photos, was a complete backup of Harrington Global's financial records. And I mean complete. Bank statements showing offshore accounts in the Caymans. Ledgers detailing payments to shell companies that existed only on paper. Email chains discussing deals that were creative interpretations of tax law at best and outright fraud at worst. Payroll records showing bonuses paid to family members for jobs they didn't actually do. Everything. It was all there, organized, dated, backed up in triplicate across 3 different cloud services because I'm not an amateur. Milton jumped down from the couch and padded over to his food bowl, meowing in that demanding way that cats do when they think the world revolves around them. I got up to feed him, still holding my whiskey, and realized something important. They thought they'd embarrassed me tonight. They thought they'd broken me, humiliated me in front of the whole family, put me in my place. Cute. Really cute. What they'd actually done was free me from any remaining loyalty I might have had. They'd cut the last thread connecting me to their circus of nepotism and fraud. You know what, Milton? I said, scooping cat food into his bowl while he wound around my ankles pretending he loved me for 30 seconds. I think tomorrow's going to be a really interesting day at Harrington Global. Milton didn't care. He never does. But I cared. Oh boy, did I care. I cared with the intensity of a man who'd just been publicly humiliated and happened to have detailed evidence of financial crimes sitting on his laptop. I went back to the couch, opened my laptop, and looked at that folder. Family Chaos Starter Kit. I'd renamed it about 6 months ago during one of Sabrina's mysterious business trips. Inside were subfolders organized by category: questionable tax strategies, offshore fun times, shell company adventures, payments to non-existent consultants, and my personal favorite. That time Richard definitely committed securities fraud, but called it innovation. The beautiful thing about being the COO is that you see everything. Every transaction crosses your desk. Every deal needs your approval. Every sketchy business decision that Richard made while convinced he was smarter than the SEC got documented, filed, and backed up by yours truly. At the time, I told myself I was just being thorough, just keeping good records in case we ever got audited. But deep down, some part of me must have known this day was coming. Some part of me was smart enough to keep insurance. I took another sip of whiskey and started reading through the files, refreshing my memory on just how creative Harrington Global had gotten with interpreting financial regulations. There was some truly impressive stuff in here, the kind of accounting that would make a forensic auditor weep with either joy or horror, depending on which side they were on. Richard had been running this company like his own personal piggy bank, moving money around like a shell game, paying himself and his family through so many different channels that it probably qualified as performance art. And now they wanted to hand all of this to Mark. Mark, who couldn't manage his way out of a paper bag with GPS and a machete. Mark, whose idea of business strategy was posting motivational quotes on LinkedIn and calling it networking. This was going to be entertaining. This was going to be so entertaining that I almost felt bad for what was about to happen. Almost. But then I remembered Greg's clapping and Richard's smug smile and Sabrina's cold, "Don't make a scene." And suddenly, I didn't feel bad at all. Milton finished his food and jumped back onto the couch, settling into a spot that was definitely where I'd been sitting, because cats are tiny furry tyrants. I moved over to make room for him and kept scrolling through files. 7 years of work. 7 years of loyalty. 7 years of saving Richard's company from his own terrible decisions, of covering for Greg's incompetence, of making Sabrina look good at charity events by actually organizing the things she took credit for. And this was my thank you. A public firing at a fancy restaurant, orchestrated like a reality TV show, with my ex-COO position going to my wife's ex-boyfriend, who probably couldn't spell fiduciary responsibility, even with autocorrect. Well, if they wanted to play family politics, I could play too. Except I had something they didn't have: documentation, preparation, and absolutely nothing left to lose. They'd cut me out of the company thinking I'd just disappear quietly, maybe sign some severance agreement with a non-disclosure clause, fade into the background like a bad employee they were happy to be rid of. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I wasn't some random hire they could dismiss. I was the guy who knew where all the bodies were buried, and I'd helpfully created a map with GPS coordinates. I smiled at my laptop screen, at all those carefully organized folders full of evidence, and raised my glass in a solitary toast. To family loyalty, I said to Milton and the empty room, and to teaching them what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. Milton blinked slowly at me, which in cat language either means, "I love you," or, "You're being dramatic and I don't care." Probably the latter, but that was okay. Tomorrow, the Harringtons were going to care very much indeed. I woke up the next morning on my couch with Milton sitting directly on my chest, staring at me with those judgmental green eyes that cats use to communicate their deep disappointment in your existence. My neck hurt from the weird angle I'd fallen asleep at. There was an empty whiskey glass on the coffee table next to my laptop, and for about 3 blissful seconds, I thought maybe last night had been some kind of stress-induced nightmare brought on by too much work and not enough therapy. Then reality came crashing back like a freight train made of embarrassment and family betrayal. And I remembered that nope, it was all real. I really had been fired at a fancy dinner party. That actually happened. "Morning, Milton," I croaked, my voice rough from whiskey and righteous anger. Still unemployed. Living the dream. Milton responded by kneading his claws into my chest through my dress shirt, which I'd apparently slept in because I'm a functional adult making great life choices. I pushed him gently off me and sat up, my back protesting every movement like I'd spent the night wrestling alligators instead of drinking alone and plotting revenge. My phone was buzzing on the coffee table, vibrating itself slowly toward the edge like it was trying to escape, and I had a pretty good idea what that meant. The damage control had begun. I picked up my phone and scrolled through the notifications, each one more entertaining than the last. 17 missed calls, 32 text messages, 8 emails. It was like Christmas morning if Christmas was about your life falling apart and everyone wanting to weigh in on it. I opened the messages first because I like to start my day with a good laugh, and boy, did the Harrington family deliver. Richard had texted at 6:30 in the morning, because of course he had. The man probably woke up at 5 to do power yoga and yell at his stock portfolio. Daniel, we need to discuss severance terms and transition protocol. Please come to the office at 9 a.m. Keep this professional. Professional. The man fired me at a dinner party in front of 50 relatives, and he wanted to keep things professional. That was like punching someone in the face at a wedding and then asking them to please not bleed on the cake. Greg's message was even better. Dude, you really blew it last night. Dad is furious. That whole bankruptcy comment? Not cool, man. We're family. You should have just taken it with grace. Taken it with grace. I should have gracefully accepted being publicly humiliated and replaced by Sabrina's ex-boyfriend. Sure, Greg. Let me just gracefully accept the knife in my back. Maybe I should have thanked them for the opportunity to be betrayed. Written a thank you note. Dear Harrington family, thanks so much for the years of exploitation and the memorable firing experience. The dinner was lovely. Then there was Mark's message, and this one actually made me laugh out loud. A sharp barking sound that startled Milton off the arm of the couch. Just a winking emoji. That's it. No words, just a winking emoji at 7:15 in the morning from the guy who was taking my job. The audacity. The sheer, unfiltered audacity of this crypto bro who probably used LinkedIn as his primary form of social interaction. I stared at that little winking face and felt something crystallize inside me, something cold and determined and absolutely done with being the nice guy. But the real kicker, the cherry on top of this garbage sundae, was that Sabrina hadn't sent anything. Not a text, not a call, not even a passive-aggressive emoji. Radio silence from my wife of 7 years, the woman who'd watched me get fired by her father and said, "Don't make a scene." She couldn't even bother to send a fake apology or a "we should talk" message. Nothing. I was apparently already so erased from her life that I didn't even warrant a breakup text. That's cold even by Harrington standards, and these people had once fired their head of HR on Christmas Eve. I made coffee, the strong kind that tastes like liquid anger and tastes great, and fed Milton his breakfast while scrolling through the rest of my messages. A few former colleagues had texted asking if the rumors were true. One of the junior analysts, Jessica, had sent a message that just said WTF happened with about 7 question marks. At least someone cared enough to use proper punctuation in their shock. Most of my actual friends, the ones outside the Harrington orbit, had sent variations of "Are you okay?" and "Call me if you need anything," which was nice but also depressing because what I needed was a time machine and better judgment about who I married. Then came the emails, and this is where things got interesting in that train wreck kind of way where you can't look away even though you know it's going to be bad. The company had sent out an official announcement at 8 a.m., probably time to hit everyone's inbox right as they were settling in with their morning coffee and preparing to pretend they were working. The subject line was "Exciting Leadership Changes at Harrington Global Holdings," with an exclamation point because nothing says exciting like corporate backstabbing. I opened it and read through the carefully crafted corporate speak, the kind of language that says everything and nothing at the same time. After careful consideration and strategic planning, we are pleased to announce significant changes to our leadership structure. Daniel Price will be transitioning out of his role as Chief Operating Officer, effective immediately. We are grateful for his contributions and wish him well in his future endeavors. Future endeavors. Like I'd quit to pursue my passion for underwater basket weaving instead of being publicly fired at a restaurant that charged $20 for bread. The email went on to announce that Mark Richardson, they even got his last name in there like he was some kind of legitimate business professional instead of a guy who'd once tried to convince me that Dogecoin was the future of finance, would be joining the executive team as the new Chief Operating Officer, bringing fresh perspective and innovative strategies to the company. Fresh perspective. The guy's idea of innovation was posting motivational quotes on Instagram and calling it personal branding. And then, the real knife twist. Mark will be working closely with Sabrina Harrington Price, who will be taking on an expanded role in company operations. Sabrina Harrington Price. She'd kept my last name in the company announcement, even though she clearly wanted nothing to do with me personally. Probably for the business cards. I read the email twice, letting the corporate betrayal really sink in, and then I did something that probably wasn't smart, but felt absolutely right. I hit reply all. That beautiful, dangerous button that every corporate training warns you about. The one that can either be used for good or for spectacular self-destruction. I chose chaos. Congratulations to the new management team. I typed, my fingers flying across the keyboard with the energy of a man who'd finally stopped caring about consequences. This is truly an exciting development for Harrington Global Holdings. I've attached an updated list of all pending legal matters, regulatory reviews, and compliance issues currently under investigation. Some of the names involved may look familiar, but I'm sure the new leadership team will handle everything with the same level of integrity and professionalism that went into this transition. Best of luck to everyone involved. You're going to need it. Then I attached a document. Not the full nuclear option, I was saving that for later, but enough to make everyone very, very nervous. A simple spreadsheet listing every audit, investigation, and regulatory inquiry that Harrington Global was currently facing, complete with case numbers and which family members were named in which investigations. Nothing classified, nothing confidential, just publicly available information organized in one convenient, deeply concerning document. I hit send before I could talk myself out of it and watched the email whoosh away into the digital void. 10 seconds of silence. Then my phone started ringing. Not buzzing, not dinging with texts, but actually ringing with that old-fashioned phone call sound that meant someone was panicking hard enough that typing wasn't fast enough. I looked at the caller ID. Patricia Morrison, head of legal for Harrington Global, the woman who'd been with the company for 20 years and had probably seen every terrible decision Richard had ever made. I answered on the third ring, taking a sip of my coffee first because I wanted her to wait. Daniel. Patricia's voice came through tight and controlled, the vocal equivalent of someone trying not to scream in a library. What did you just send? She wasn't asking for clarification. She knew exactly what I'd sent. She was asking what the hell I was thinking sending it to the entire company. Just a friendly reminder about our ongoing legal obligations, I said cheerfully, scratching Milton behind his ears while he purred and judged me simultaneously. I thought the new management should be aware of all current compliance matters. Transparency is so important in leadership transitions, don't you think? Daniel, that list includes. She paused, and I could hear papers rustling, probably her printing out my email in a panic. That includes pending SEC investigations, IRS audits, and 3 different regulatory reviews. Half of these investigations name Richard personally. You just sent this to 400 employees. 473, actually, I corrected. I included the satellite offices. Wouldn't want anyone to feel left out of the excitement. There was a long pause. Then Patricia, bless her, started laughing. Not hysterical laughter, but the kind of exhausted, I can't believe this is happening laugh that comes from someone who'd probably wanted to do exactly what I just did for about 15 years, but couldn't because she needed her paycheck. You know Richard is going to lose his mind, right? She said, still laughing. He's probably already having a stroke in his office. Patricia, between you and me, I hope he's having a very educational morning, I said. Think of it as my parting gift to the company. A little reality check about what happens when you prioritize nepotism over competence. They're going to sue you, she warned, but she didn't sound particularly concerned about it. If anything, she sounded almost impressed. For what? Sending publicly available information in a company email? Good luck with that. I took another sip of coffee. Besides, I haven't even started yet. This was just the appetizer. Tell Richard I'll be happy to discuss severance terms, but I think we both know how that conversation is going to go. Patricia sighed. You know, when you first started here, I told Richard you were too smart for your own good. I should have warned you instead. Good luck, Daniel. Something tells me you're going to be just fine. She hung up, and I sat there on my couch with my cat and my coffee, watching my phone explode with incoming calls and messages from people who'd just realized that maybe, just maybe, firing Daniel Price at a dinner party hadn't been the smartest move Richard Harrington had ever made. Milton yawned and stretched, completely unconcerned with the corporate warfare I'd just initiated. "You know what, buddy?" I said to him. "I think I'm going to enjoy being unemployed." By the time morning had properly arrived, and by properly arrived, I mean the sun was all the way up and I was on my third cup of coffee, the gossip had spread through the business community faster than insider trading rumors at a Wall Street bar during happy hour. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing since Patricia hung up, vibrating so constantly that it had slowly worked its way across the coffee table like some kind of electronic caterpillar. Milton had given up on getting any attention from me and had relocated to his favorite spot on top of the refrigerator, where he could look down on me with maximum judgment while I watched my former life implode in real time. The text messages kept rolling in, each one more entertaining than the last. Richard had moved past his professional, "let's discuss severance" tone and progressed into what I can only describe as barely controlled fury translated into business speak. His second message read, "Your behavior this morning was completely inappropriate and potentially actionable. We need to meet immediately to discuss damage control and your contractual obligations regarding confidential information." Contractual obligations. The man was already thinking about lawsuits, which meant I'd hit a nerve. Good. I wanted to hit all the nerves. I wanted to play his nervous system like a piano. Greg had messaged again, and this time he dropped the dude act entirely. "This isn't a game, Daniel. You just made a huge mistake. Dad's lawyers are already drafting papers. Whatever you think you're doing, it's not worth it. Just apologize, and maybe we can all move past this." Apologize. I should apologize for sending out publicly available information about the company's legal troubles after being fired at a dinner party. Sure, Greg. Right after I apologize for having the audacity to expect loyalty from family. That'll be happening right around Never 30 on the 12th of Never. Mark had sent another message, and I have to give him credit for consistency, if nothing else. This time it wasn't just an emoji, he'd graduated to actual words. "Bad move, bro. You should have just walked away clean. Nobody likes a sore loser. Bro." He called me bro. This man was sleeping with my wife, taking my job, and calling me bro like we were frat buddies who'd had a minor disagreement about fantasy football. The level of delusion required to send that message was almost impressive. Almost. But the real silence, the deafening absence that somehow shouted louder than all the angry messages combined, was still coming from Sabrina, my wife. And wasn't that word starting to feel weird in my mouth? Like calling someone your wife when they'd clearly filed for divorce and everything but the legal paperwork, hadn't sent a single word. Not even a "we need to talk," or a "this is inappropriate," or a "please stop making my family look bad." Nothing. Radio silence from the woman I'd spent 7 years building a life with, or at least thinking I was building a life with while she was apparently building an exit strategy. I was contemplating whether to pour a fourth cup of coffee or switch to something stronger when the emails started coming in, and this is where things got really interesting in that beautiful, chaotic way that makes you feel alive even while everything's falling apart. Someone had forwarded my email to people outside the company. I don't know who. My money's on Patricia because she struck me as the type who appreciated good drama. But suddenly people who had no business knowing about Harrington Global's legal troubles were very much in the know. Former business partners started reaching out. Competitors were asking questions. Industry journalists who covered real estate and corporate finance were suddenly very interested in having conversations. One reporter from the Business Journal sent an email with the subject line, following up on some interesting developments, and I could practically hear the excitement in her typing. The corporate equivalent of blood in the water, and the sharks were starting to circle. Then came the cherry on top of this increasingly chaotic Sunday. A company-wide email sent at 9:45 a.m., clearly drafted in a panic by the PR team, who were probably wondering what they did to deserve this job. The subject line was clarification regarding recent communications, and I knew before I even opened it that this was going to be comedy gold. Corporate damage control is always comedy gold because it's written by people desperately trying to unring a bell while pretending the bell never rang in the first place. Dear Harrington Global Team, it began, and I could practically see the PR director sweating while writing this. This morning, Several employees received a communication from a former team member regarding various ongoing business matters. We want to clarify that this communication was sent without authorization and contains misleading characterizations of routine business activities. All listed matters are being handled appropriately by our legal team and pose no threat to company operations or reputation. We ask that you disregard this communication and direct any questions to HR or your immediate supervisor. Thank you for your continued dedication to Harrington Global Holdings. Misleading characterizations of routine business activities. That's what they were calling SEC investigations and IRS audits now. Routine business activities, like getting investigated for securities fraud, was the corporate equivalent of getting your oil changed. I had to hand it to them. The spin was impressive, even if it was complete garbage. But here's the thing about trying to tell 473 people to ignore something. It has exactly the opposite effect. Telling people to disregard information is like telling them, this is definitely something you should be curious about. My phone rang again, and this time it was a number I actually recognized and wanted to answer. Liam Chun, an investigative journalist I'd worked with about 3 years ago when I'd helped him expose a real estate Ponzi scheme that had been operating out of a rival company. We'd kept in touch the way people do when they've bonded over taking down financial criminals, occasional emails, holiday cards, that kind of thing. Liam was good at his job, the kind of good that made corporate executives nervous and CFOs develop drinking problems. Daniel Price. Liam's voice came through sounding way too cheerful for someone calling at 10 in the morning. You beautiful, chaos-creating son of a bitch. Tell me you didn't just do what I think you did. I laughed, the first genuine laugh I'd had since before the disaster dinner. Depends on what you think I did. If you think I sent an email listing all of Harrington Global's legal troubles to the entire company after they fired me at a family dinner, then yes, I absolutely did exactly that. They fired you at a dinner? Like, during the meal? Liam sounded delighted. That's some next-level family dysfunction right there. I'm almost impressed. But Daniel, my friend, that email you sent? That's not just chaos. That's like you rang the dinner bell for every journalist in the city. I've already gotten 3 calls asking if I know anything about Harrington Global. Funny you should mention that, I said, standing up and walking to the window. Outside, the day looked perfectly normal. Birds chirping, neighbors getting their mail, no visible signs that my life had become a corporate warfare zone. You got time for coffee? I've got something that might interest you. Something a lot juicier than a simple email list. There was a pause. I could practically hear Liam's journalistic instincts kicking into high gear. How juicy are we talking? Like, slightly interesting juicy or ruin someone's life juicy? More like ruin multiple lives and potentially send people to prison juicy, I said. I've got 7 years of financial records, email trails, and documentation of activities that make that Ponzi scheme we exposed look like a kid's lemonade stand. Interested? Are you kidding me? I'm already getting my laptop. Where and when? Liam sounded like a kid who'd just been told Christmas was coming early and Santa was bringing evidence of white-collar crime. There's a coffee shop on Main Street, the one with the overpriced lattes and the baristas who judge your life choices. Meet me there in an hour. I was about to hang up when I added, and Liam? Bring a lot of storage space. This is going to be a substantial file transfer. Daniel, I love you in a completely professional, journalistic way. See you in an hour. He hung up, and I stood there looking at my phone, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not quite happiness. This whole situation was still a dumpster fire of betrayal and broken trust, but something like satisfaction. The kind of satisfaction you get when you realize you're not the victim in this story. You're the guy with all the evidence and a journalist friend who specializes in exposing corporate fraud. My phone buzzed again with another text from Richard. This one apparently written by his lawyers because it was full of words like cease and desist and legal ramifications and immediate compliance required. I read it twice, smiled, and then did something that probably wasn't mature but felt absolutely right. I responded with a single sentence. See you at the bankruptcy meeting, followed by a smiley face emoji because if Mark could communicate in emojis, so could I. Then I blocked Richard's number. And Greg's. And Mark's. Not Sabrina's, though. I wanted to see if she'd ever actually bother to reach out, or if I'd just been ghosted by my own wife. I had a feeling I knew which way that was going to go, but there was something darkly funny about waiting to see if the woman I'd married could even be bothered to send a "we should probably get divorced" text. I took a shower, got dressed in actual clothes instead of yesterday's wrinkled dress shirt, and made sure Milton had enough food and water to sustain his judgmental existence while I was out destroying my former in-law's business empire. He watched me from his perch on the refrigerator with those green eyes that somehow conveyed both complete indifference and total awareness that something interesting was happening. "Milton," I said, grabbing my laptop bag and checking that the external hard drive with all my backed-up files was safely inside. "If anyone calls asking where I am, tell them I'm out having coffee with a journalist and planning the downfall of a corrupt real estate empire. Think you can handle that?" Milton yawned, which I took as confirmation. I locked the door behind me and headed to my car, feeling lighter than I had in months. Maybe it was the lack of job stress. Maybe it was the freedom of having nothing left to lose. Or maybe it was just the pure, simple joy of knowing that Richard Harrington was probably in his office right now, reading my response, and realizing that the son-in-law he'd so casually discarded at a dinner party wasn't going to disappear quietly into the background. The drive to the coffee shop took 15 minutes, and I spent the whole time thinking about exactly how much information to give Liam. All of it. Just enough to start an investigation. The beautiful thing about having 7 years of documented evidence is that you can portion it out like a really satisfying revenge meal, serving up course after course of corporate malfeasance until everyone's too full of scandal to eat anymore. The coffee shop on Main Street was exactly the kind of place where you'd expect to plan the downfall of a corrupt real estate empire. All exposed brick walls, reclaimed wood tables, and baristas with master's degrees who made your latte while silently judging every life choice that led you to ordering a $5 coffee. I spotted Liam in the corner booth, already set up with his laptop, a legal pad covered in notes, and 2 coffees on the table. He waved me over with the enthusiasm of a reporter who could smell a Pulitzer Prize from 3 blocks away. "You look surprisingly good for a guy who just committed corporate suicide," Liam said as I slid into the booth across from him. He pushed one of the coffees toward me, an espresso, because he remembered I didn't have time for fancy drinks when there was revenge to plan. "I half expected you to show up looking like you'd been crying into a whiskey bottle for 12 hours. "Oh, I did that last night," I said, taking a sip of the espresso. "Today I'm operating on spite and caffeine, which is honestly a more effective combination than therapy." I pulled out my laptop and the external hard drive, setting them on the table between us like we were arms dealers making a transaction. "So, you want to know about Harrington Global Holdings and their creative interpretation of financial law?" Liam's eyes locked onto that hard drive like it was made of solid gold. "Daniel, before you show me anything, I need to know, is this information obtained legally? Because if you hacked into their systems or stole files, I can't use it no matter how juicy it is." "Completely legal," I assured him. I was the COO for 7 years. Every file on this drive is something I had authorized access to as part of my job. I backed up company records because that's what responsible executives do. The fact that those records happen to document years of fraud, money laundering, and tax evasion, well, that's just unfortunate timing for Richard. Liam grinned and flipped open his laptop. "Okay, I'm listening. What VE you got?" I plugged in the hard drive and started pulling up files. Let's start with the easy stuff, shell companies. Richard's been funneling money through at least 15 different LLCs that exist only on paper. They're listed as charitable organizations, but the only charity happening is donations to the Harrington family bank accounts. I pulled up a spreadsheet showing transactions going back 5 years. See these payments? Every month, like clockwork, money goes out to these companies and then mysteriously reappears in offshore accounts. Liam's eyebrows climbed higher with each row of data. "Holy shit. Daniel, this is money laundering. Like, textbook, going to prison for a long time money laundering." "It gets better," I said, clicking through to another folder. Here's where Richard used those same shell charities to write off millions in fake donations, reducing the company's tax burden to basically nothing. The IRS has been sniffing around for 6 months, but they haven't connected all the dots yet. I have all the dots. I have a dot map with GPS coordinates and a legend. For the next hour, I walked Liam through 7 years of financial crimes, each one more brazen than the last. Fake consulting contracts paid to family members who never did any actual work. Real estate deals structured to avoid capital gains taxes through a series of paper transfers that would make a shell game operator jealous. Misuse of company funds that technically qualified as embezzlement. It was a greatest hits album of white-collar crime, and Richard Harrington was the lead singer. "You realize what you're giving me here," Liam said, his fingers flying across his keyboard as he took notes. "This isn't just a story. This is a multi-part investigative series. This is career-making journalism. Daniel, why are you doing this? And don't say revenge, because this goes way beyond getting even." I leaned back in the booth and thought about that question. Why was I doing this? Yeah, there was revenge involved. I'd be lying if I said watching Richard squirm wasn't satisfying. But it was more than that. You know what the worst part is? I spent 7 years making this company successful. I actually believed in it. I thought we were building something legitimate, something that mattered. And the whole time, Richard was using it as his personal criminal enterprise while I was too busy working to notice. So yeah, part of this is revenge. But part of it is just wanting people to know the truth. They fired me to cover their tracks. They brought in Mark because he's too stupid to ask questions. This was never about new leadership or fresh perspectives. This was about getting rid of the one person who knew where all the bodies were buried. Liam nodded slowly, still typing. Okay, so here's what I'm thinking. I need a few days to verify everything, cross-reference the documents, maybe reach out to some sources at the SEC and IRS. But Daniel, if even half of this checks out, and I'm betting it all checks out, I can have the first article ready by this weekend. The company's got that big shareholders gala on Saturday night, right? The annual shareholders gala at the Metropolitan Grand Ballroom. I confirmed. Black tie, champagne, Richard giving a speech about the company's bright future. It's his favorite night of the year. He loves standing up there pretending he's a legitimate businessman instead of a guy who should be wearing an orange jumpsuit. Perfect, Liam said, and his smile was the kind of smile that meant bad news for someone. Here's what we do. I publish the exposé Saturday morning. It hits the news cycle right before the gala. By the time Richard steps up to that podium, every shareholder in the room will have read about his criminal activities. You want revenge? I'll give you revenge with a national audience. I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. Do it. Publish everything. I want the whole world to know what Richard Harrington really is. Then I had an even better idea. Actually, Liam, you know what would make this perfect? If I showed up to the gala anyway, uninvited, just walked right in and watched Richard's face when he realizes his whole empire is collapsing in real time. Liam laughed so hard he nearly knocked over his coffee. You're insane. I love it. But Daniel, seriously, are you ready for this? Once this article drops, there's no going back. The Harringtons are going to come after you with everything they've got. Lawsuits, character assassination, probably threats. Are you sure you want to go to war with these people? I finished my espresso and looked Liam straight in the eye. They already went to war with me. They fired me at a dinner party, replaced me with my wife's ex-boyfriend, and thought I'd just disappear quietly. I'm not starting this war, Liam. I'm just finishing it. And I'm finishing it with evidence, documentation, and a journalist who knows how to write a hell of a story. So yeah, I'm ready. Publish everything. Let's burn it all down. Saturday night arrived with the kind of perfect timing that makes you believe the universe occasionally gets its act together just to watch rich people suffer. I spent the day watching Liam's article spread across the internet like wildfire in a drought. Each share and retweet another nail in Richard Harrington's professionally polished coffin. The headline was beautiful in its simplicity. Harrington Global Holdings, a real estate empire built on fraud, shell companies, and family greed. Liam hadn't pulled any punches, and the article was currently trending on 3 different business news sites and had been picked up by 2 major national outlets. The Metropolitan Grand Ballroom was exactly the kind of venue where you'd expect corrupt real estate moguls to celebrate themselves. Massive chandeliers dripping crystal like expensive tears, champagne flowing like someone had tapped directly into a vineyard, and enough black tie pretension to choke a diplomat. I showed up wearing my best suit, the same one I'd worn to the disaster dinner, because I'm nothing if not consistent. The security guard at the entrance checked the guest list, didn't find my name because obviously I wasn't invited to my own professional funeral's anniversary party, and looked at me with that particular expression that says, "Sir, I'm going to need you to leave." "I'm here returning company property," I said smoothly, holding up a USB drive like it was a golden ticket. "Richard Harrington will definitely want to see this. Trust me, he's expecting me." That was a complete lie, but I sold it with enough confidence that the security guard hesitated, probably trying to figure out if turning away someone with important documents was worth losing his job over. Before he could make a decision, I spotted Patricia from legal coming out of the ballroom, probably looking for a quiet place to check her phone and avoid small talk with shareholders. She saw me, her eyes went wide, and then, bless this woman, she started laughing. Actually laughing, right there in the fancy lobby with its marble floors and judgmental oil paintings of dead businessmen. "Daniel Price, you beautiful disaster," she said, walking over. "Please tell me you're here to cause chaos." "Would I do that?" I asked innocently. "In a heartbeat," she said, still grinning. Richard's inside having a panic attack disguised as a welcome speech. Half the shareholders read Liam's article this morning, and the other half are getting caught up via whispered gossip. It's like watching the Titanic sink in slow motion while the band plays, and everyone pretends the iceberg is just an ice sculpture. She paused. "You should absolutely go in there." The security guard looked between us, clearly confused about whether I was a threat or an invited guest or some weird corporate third option. Patricia solved his dilemma by saying, "He's with me. Legal business." Then she linked her arm through mine and walked me straight past security into the ballroom like we were attending prom instead of corporate Armageddon. Inside was even better than I'd imagined. The room was packed with shareholders, board members, business partners, and all the usual suspects who show up when there's free expensive food and networking opportunities. But the atmosphere was wrong. Usually these events have this buzz of optimistic greed, everyone excited about profits and expansion and whatever other buzzwords justify their existence. Tonight felt like a funeral where nobody was quite sure if they should admit the deceased was murdered. Richard was standing near the front of the room by the podium, and I have to say, he looked terrible. His face had that gray quality people get when they're trying to smile through a heart attack. He was surrounded by board members and family. I spotted Greg looking like he'd aged 5 years in 5 days, and Sabrina standing off to the side, checking her phone like she could somehow scroll away from reality. Mark was conspicuously absent, which probably meant he'd jumped ship the second things got messy, because of course he had. The moment Richard saw me, his face went from gray to purple so fast I worried he might actually stroke out right there on the ballroom floor. He said something to Greg, who turned around and spotted me, his expression cycling through shock, anger, and what might have been fear in the span of about 3 seconds. People were starting to notice the commotion. Phones were coming out, and I could feel that electric moment of anticipation building like we were all waiting for a bomb to go off. I walked straight toward Richard, Patricia trailing behind me like my corporate attorney/bodyguard/friend who appreciated good drama. The crowd parted like I was radioactive, which honestly wasn't far from the truth given that I'd just torpedoed this entire company's reputation from orbit. Richard stepped forward to intercept me, probably planning to have security throw me out before I could say anything, but I beat him to it. "Richard," I said loudly, cheerfully, like we were old friends running into each other at a coffee shop instead of enemies meeting at the scene of a corporate crime. "I'm so glad I caught you. I wanted to return some company property." I held up the USB drive, making sure everyone nearby could see it. "Consider it a gift. Full transparency and all that." "What are you doing here?" Richard hissed, trying to keep his voice low but failing spectacularly. "You're not welcome here." "Security. Security already let me in," I said. "Legal business, you know how it is." I gestured to Patricia, who gave a little wave. "I just thought the shareholders deserved to have all the information. Transparency is so important in times of transition, don't you think? That's what you said at the dinner, right? When you fired me, phones buzzed. Multiple phones. Then dozens. It was like watching a wave of notifications crash through the room as Liam's follow-up article dropped. He timed it perfectly for maximum impact. I'd given him a heads up that I was crashing the gala, and he'd saved some of the juiciest details for a Saturday evening bombshell. The headline notifications lit up screens all around us. Breaking. New documents show Harrington global executives named in multiple federal investigations. Richard's face went from purple to white. Murmurs spread through the crowd like wildfire. I saw shareholders frantically reading their phones, saw board members exchanging panicked glances, saw the exact moment everyone in that ballroom realized they were potentially implicated in or financially tied to a criminal enterprise. It was beautiful. It was perfect. It was everything I'd hoped for and more. To loyalty, I said, raising an imaginary glass toward Richard, and to family values, and to what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. Then I placed the USB drive on the table next to him. It was actually empty, just a prop. All the real evidence was already with Liam, and probably the SEC by now, and turned to leave. You've destroyed everything, Richard shouted after me, abandoning all pretense of dignity. You've ruined this company, ruined this family. I stopped and turned back, making sure my voice carried across the entire ballroom. No, Richard, you destroyed it. I just wrote the press release. Then I walked out of that ballroom with Patricia laughing beside me, leaving behind the sound of Richard Harrington's empire crumbling to the soundtrack of buzzing phones and panicked conversations. Sunday morning, I woke up to discover that the Harrington family meltdown had gone viral. And I mean viral in that beautiful, schadenfreude-filled way where the internet collectively decides that watching rich people suffer is better entertainment than anything Netflix could produce. I made coffee, settled onto my couch with Milton curled up beside me radiating his usual indifference, and turned on the news to find that every major business channel was covering the story like it was the financial scandal equivalent of the Super Bowl. The best part? News vans had descended on the Harrington estate like a biblical plague of journalism. I'm talking satellite trucks, reporters with perfectly styled hair doing live shots from the end of the driveway, helicopter footage of the mansion that made it look like a crime scene, which technically it kind of was. Richard's house, this massive colonial monstrosity that screamed, "I have more money than taste," was completely surrounded. You couldn't see the front door without also seeing at least 3 camera crews and a reporter explaining to viewers that yes, this was indeed where alleged white-collar criminals lived. I switched between channels with the dedication of someone watching their favorite sports team. Except instead of football, it was the systematic destruction of my former in-law's reputation, and I was way more invested in the outcome. Channel 7 had a financial analyst explaining how shell companies work to an audience that probably didn't care but was watching anyway because the scandal was juicy. Channel 4 had obtained photos from the gala showing Richard's face going through the 5 stages of grief in real time. Channel 11 had somehow gotten an interview with one of the Harrington Global shareholders who was using words like betrayed and criminal negligence, and I'm definitely suing. But the absolute cherry on top of this schadenfreude Sunday was the footage of the family trying to do damage control. And by damage control, I mean publicly blaming each other like rats abandoning a sinking ship. Except the rats were wearing designer clothes and had PR teams frantically trying to stop them from talking to reporters. Greg had apparently given an interview, without consulting the lawyers, bless his stupid heart, where he tried to distance himself from his father's business decisions. "I was never involved in the financial side of things," he told a reporter while standing in front of what looked like a country club. "That was all my father and Daniel Price. I'm just as shocked as everyone else." The audacity of this man to throw me under the bus when I was the one driving the bus directly through his family's reputation was almost impressive. Almost. Then Mark, because of course Mark couldn't resist inserting himself into the drama, had posted something on LinkedIn that was so tone-deaf it had already become a meme. In times of crisis, true leaders emerge. Looking forward to guiding Harrington Global through this challenging period with integrity and vision. #leadership, #business ethics, #new beginnings. The comments section was absolutely destroying him. Someone had replied, "You've been COO for 5 days and the company is under federal investigation. Congratulations on your speed run of corporate destruction." That comment had about 3,000 likes. But Sabrina took the prize for most spectacular public implosion. She'd apparently done an interview with Channel 7, again, without legal counsel, which made me wonder if the entire family had decided that lawyers were optional during federal investigations, where she tried to position herself as a victim. "This has been incredibly stressful for our family," she said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue while wearing sunglasses that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. "My father worked his whole life to build this company, and to see it attacked like this by someone we trusted, someone we welcomed into our family, it's devastating." I actually laughed out loud at that, startling Milton, who gave me a look that suggested I was disturbing his very important napping schedule. Someone we trusted. Someone we welcomed into the family. The revisionist history was astounding. I'd been part of that family for 7 years, worked myself half to death for their company, and gotten fired at a dinner party for my trouble. But sure, Sabrina, I was the problem here. Not the money laundering or the tax fraud or the shell companies. Me, the guy who documented all the crimes and had the audacity to tell people about them. The best part of Sabrina's interview came when the reporter asked about the divorce rumors. Because of course there were divorce rumors. Nothing stays secret when you're trending on Twitter. Daniel and I are working through some personal issues, she said, which was a fascinating way to describe, my husband exposed my family's criminal enterprise and I haven't spoken to him in a week. Then she added, but this isn't about our marriage. This is about his betrayal of the entire Harrington family. Betrayal. That word again. These people really love that word. I'd betrayed them by refusing to be complicit in fraud. I'd betrayed them by having a conscience. I'd betrayed them by not quietly accepting my firing and disappearing into the sunset like a good little expendable son-in-law. I grabbed my phone and saw that Sabrina had finally sent me a text. The first communication from my wife in 6 days, and it was a masterpiece of misplaced anger. Are you happy now? You've destroyed everything. My father's reputation, the company, our family name. Was it worth it? Was your revenge worth ruining all our lives? I stared at that message for a long moment, considering all the ways I could respond. I could write a long explanation about integrity and accountability. I could point out that I didn't ruin their lives, their crimes did. I could explain that sometimes the right thing to do isn't the easy thing to do. But instead, I wrote back, I haven't opened my wine yet, so not completely happy. But we're getting there. Her response came back immediately. You're a monster. No, sweetheart, I typed back. I just revealed what was already monstrous. There's a difference. But hey, thanks for finally texting me. I was starting to think we'd get divorced without ever having an actual conversation about it. She didn't respond to that, which honestly was probably for the best, because this conversation was going nowhere productive and I had more important things to do. Like watch the news coverage of her brother trying to blame everything on me while simultaneously claiming he knew nothing about the company's operations. Pick a lane, Greg. You can't be both completely uninvolved and also confident enough to point fingers. By noon, 3 different shareholders had filed lawsuits. By 2 p.m., the SEC had released a statement confirming they were actively investigating matters related to Harrington Global Holdings. By 4 p.m., Richard had released a statement through his lawyers that he was temporarily stepping back from day-to-day operations, which is corporate speak for, I'm trying to resign before I get arrested. I watched it all unfold from my couch with Milton. Eating popcorn like this was a movie marathon instead of the real-time collapse of a real estate empire. Every news update was another domino falling. Every interview was another family member saying something that would definitely be used against them in court. Every statement from their PR team was another attempt to polish a turd that was already rolling downhill at terminal velocity. You know what, Milton? I said to the cat, who was now grooming himself and completely ignoring the television. I think I'm ready for that wine now. I got up, grabbed the expensive bottle I'd been saving, and poured myself a generous glass. On the TV, a legal expert was explaining how shell company fraud worked and why the Harringtons were in serious legal jeopardy. I raised my glass toward the screen in a silent toast. To justice, to karma, to the beautiful, perfect chaos of watching corrupt people face consequences for their actions. My phone buzzed with a text from Liam. Dude, they're eating each other alive on live television. This is the best week of my career. Thank you for being vindictive enough to burn everything down. I laughed and texted back. That's what friends are for. Also, I'm pretty sure Greg just accidentally confessed to insider trading on Channel 4. I saw that, Liam replied. I'm writing a follow-up piece. These people are the gift that keeps on giving. They really were. By Monday morning, the Harrington Global Holdings empire was in full-blown crisis mode, the kind of crisis that makes corporate disaster movies look optimistic. Investigations had launched from so many different regulatory agencies that I lost count somewhere around 5. The SEC was investigating securities fraud. The IRS was investigating tax evasion. State regulators were investigating the shell charities. The FBI, and yeah, the actual FBI, was investigating possible money laundering and racketeering. It was like watching every law enforcement agency decide to have a convention, and the venue was Richard Harrington's financial records. Stockholders weren't just filing lawsuits anymore. They were forming coalitions, organizing class actions, hiring lawyers who specialized in fiduciary negligence, and basically turning on the Harrington family like sharks who'd finally realized they'd been swimming with smaller, stupider sharks this whole time. The stock price had dropped so fast that financial analysts were using words like freefall and catastrophic, and we've never seen anything quite like this before. Watching a company's value evaporate in real time was oddly mesmerizing, like witnessing a very expensive car crash in slow motion. Richard had officially resigned for health reasons, which fooled absolutely nobody but made for great legal cover. His resignation letter, which someone had leaked to the press because of course they had, was a masterpiece of non-apology apologies. After careful consideration and in light of recent challenges, I believe it is in the company's best interest for me to step aside and allow new leadership to guide Harrington Global forward. Recent challenges. He was calling federal investigations for fraud recent challenges, like they were minor inconveniences instead of career-ending criminal allegations. Sabrina had filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences in the paperwork, which was lawyer speak for, "My husband blew up my family's criminal enterprise, and I need to distance myself before I get implicated." Her lawyer had reached out to my lawyer, because yes, I'd hired a lawyer, a really good one who specialized in high-profile divorces and had a reputation for absolutely destroying opposing counsel, with a proposal for a clean separation with minimal disruption. Translation: please don't air all our dirty laundry in divorce court while my family is already drowning in scandal. My lawyer, a terrifyingly competent woman named Sarah Chun who wore power suits and had a smile that made other attorneys nervous, had responded with a counteroffer that basically amounted to, "Your client can have a clean divorce after we discuss asset division. And by the way, we have documentation of about 15 things that might be relevant to those discussions." I didn't know what those 15 things were, but Sarah assured me they were persuasive, which in lawyer speak meant, "I have enough dirt to bury your client's legal team." Greg had declared bankruptcy. Personally bankrupt. Not the company, just Greg, individually, as a human being who'd somehow managed to go broke despite being born into wealth. Apparently, his 3 failed startups had been funded with personal loans he'd guaranteed against his Harrington Global stock, and when the stock price crashed, the banks had come calling. The man who'd clapped at my firing was now filing for Chapter 11, and I'm not proud of how much satisfaction that gave me. Actually, no, I'm completely proud of it. Greg's bankruptcy brought me joy. And Mark? Mark had vanished like a crypto bro who'd just gotten caught running a pump-and-dump scheme. One day he was posting LinkedIn updates about leadership in crisis. The next day his accounts were gone, his apartment was empty, and rumor had it he'd fled to somewhere without an extradition treaty. Some people said Dubai. Others said he was hiding in his mom's basement in Ohio. Either way, the man who'd winked at me via text message was now presumably winking at customs officials while trying to explain why he needed to leave the country so urgently. But here's where the story gets interesting. In that beautiful, ironic way that makes you believe the universe occasionally has a sense of humor. 2 weeks after the gala, I got a call from Patricia Morrison, the legal director who'd walked me into the ballroom like my corporate bodyguard. "Daniel," she said, her voice carrying that particular tone that meant something weird was about to happen. "The board wants to talk to you." "The board wants to talk to me?" I repeated, pretty sure I'd misheard. "The board of the company that fired me at a dinner party wants to have a conversation." "The board of the company that's currently imploding and desperately needs someone who actually knows how the business operates," Patricia corrected. "Richard's gone, Mark's missing, Greg's bankrupt, and Sabrina has stepped back to focus on family matters, which means she's trying to avoid being deposed. The company is bleeding money, shareholders are in open revolt, and nobody currently in leadership has any idea how to actually run the operations. You, on the other hand, spent 7 years actually doing the job." I sat down on my couch, trying to process what she was saying. "Patricia, I'm the guy who exposed their fraud. I'm the reason there are federal investigations. Why would they want me anywhere near that company?" "Because you're also the guy who kept the company running despite Richard's incompetence," she said. "The board has reviewed the situation, and by reviewed, I mean panicked extensively. and they've concluded that the best path forward is complete transparency and cooperation with investigations. They want to bring you back as a consultant to help stabilize operations and assist with the regulatory compliance. They're prepared to offer you triple your previous salary, complete operational autonomy, and a very generous contract that includes ironclad liability protections. Triple my salary, complete autonomy, liability protections. I looked at Milton, who was watching me from his perch on the cat tower with those inscrutable green eyes. They want to pay me 3 times what they paid me before to clean up the mess they made after firing me? That's correct, Patricia said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. It gets better. They're also prepared to issue a formal public apology for your termination, acknowledge that your departure was handled inappropriately, and make a substantial settlement payment for what they're calling wrongful termination under duress. I started laughing. I couldn't help it. The absurdity was too perfect. They'd fired me at a dinner party, replaced me with an incompetent ex-boyfriend, watched their company implode, and now they wanted to pay me triple to come back and fix everything. What did you tell them? I told them I'd ask you, Patricia said. But Daniel, between you and me, you should do it. Not for them. Screw them. Do it for yourself. Walk back into that office as the guy who saved the company from the people who tried to destroy you. Take their money, fix their mess, and let everyone know that Daniel Price isn't just the whistleblower who exposed the fraud. He's the professional who cleaned it up afterward. I thought about it for exactly 30 seconds. Okay, I said. I'll do it. But I have conditions. Name them. First, I want everything in writing. Every protection, every promise, every dollar. Second, I want Patricia Morrison as my legal advisor, with her own generous raise. Third, I want the authority to fire anyone I deem incompetent or complicit. And fourth, I smiled at Milton, who yawned like he couldn't care less about my corporate negotiations. I want a formal letter from the board acknowledging that Richard Harrington's leadership was fundamentally flawed and that my exposure of the fraud was in the best interests of the company and its shareholders. Patricia laughed. I'll make it happen. Welcome back, Daniel. And for what it's worth, I'm really glad you're the one burning this place down and rebuilding it. Me too, Patricia, I said. Me too. When I walked back into Harrington Global Holdings the following Monday, the receptionist, same one who'd greeted me every day for 7 years, looked up and smiled with genuine relief. Welcome back, Mr. Price, she said. We really missed you. I smiled back. Please, call me what everyone else is probably calling me. She grinned. What's that? Karma, I said. You can call me Karma. Exactly 2 days after I walked back into Harrington Global Holdings with my new title, my tripled salary, and my newly discovered sense of poetic justice, the Harrington family had officially become a case study in what happens when privilege meets consequences. I'm talking front-page news, trending hashtags, business school professors already drafting lectures about corporate ethics using them as the cautionary tale. It was beautiful in that schadenfreude-soaked way that makes you feel slightly guilty for enjoying it so much, but not guilty enough to actually stop enjoying it. The patriarch was under investigation by so many federal agencies that his lawyers probably needed a spreadsheet just to keep track of court dates. Richard Harrington, the man who'd thought he was untouchable because he played golf with senators and donated to the right charities, was now facing potential prison time that could be measured in decades. The SEC had frozen his assets. The IRS had put liens on his properties. The FBI had raided his home office and walked out with boxes of documents that would probably keep prosecutors busy for years. Every news outlet was running the same photo of him leaving his lawyer's office looking like he'd aged 10 years in 2 weeks, his face drawn and gray, that confident smirk completely gone. The daughter was divorcing me with a speed that suggested she'd had the papers pre-drafted and was just waiting for an excuse to file them. Sabrina Harrington Price, though I suspected she'd be dropping that price pretty quickly, was citing irreconcilable ambition in the divorce filing, which was such a perfectly Sabrina way to describe, my husband exposed my family's crimes, and I'm trying to salvage my reputation. Her lawyer and my lawyer were currently engaged in what Sarah Chun described as a very satisfying negotiation where your soon-to-be ex-wife realizes she has absolutely no leverage. Apparently, Sabrina had wanted the house, the cars, and half of everything I owned. Sarah had responded by pointing out that everything Sabrina owned was either purchased with potentially fraudulent money or was about to be seized by federal investigators. So maybe she should focus on not getting indicted instead of fighting over assets. The son was bankrupt in that particularly humiliating way that rich people experience bankruptcy, where you're not actually poor, but you're definitely not rich anymore, and all your rich friends won't return your calls. Greg had filed for Chapter 11, claiming debts of over $15 million against assets that were mostly worthless stock in a company under federal investigation. The 3 failed startups he'd poured money into, including that absolutely ridiculous artisanal ice cube subscription service, had all collapsed, and the investors were now suing him personally for misrepresentation and fraud. Last I heard, he was living in a rental apartment and driving a Honda Civic, which for Greg was probably the equivalent of homelessness. The ex-boyfriend was missing, and by missing I mean definitely fled the country and probably isn't coming back. Mark Richardson, the crypto bro who'd thought he could walk into the COO position and figure it out as he went along, had apparently realized that new chief operating officer at company under federal investigation wasn't a great resume builder. His LinkedIn was deleted. His apartment was empty. His phone number was disconnected. Rumor had it he'd been spotted in the Bahamas trying to explain to local authorities that no, he definitely wasn't fleeing from anything. He just really needed an extended vacation right now, immediately, with all his liquid assets. Some entrepreneurial Redditor had started a "Where's Mark?" thread that was tracking supposed sightings like he was Bigfoot, except less credible and more pathetic. And me? I was sitting on my balcony on a perfect evening, the kind of evening where the temperature is just right and the sunset looks like something from a painting, with Milton curled up on the chair next to me purring contentedly. I had a glass of whiskey in one hand, the expensive stuff, the kind I could now afford because I was making triple my old salary, and my phone in the other hand, scrolling through the latest headlines about the Harrington family implosion with the dedication of someone watching their favorite show. Harrington Global founder Richard Harrington faces 47 criminal counts, read one headline. Former real estate mogul's empire crumbles amid fraud investigation, said another. The fall of the Harrington dynasty, how one family's greed led to federal charges, proclaimed a think piece from a major business magazine. Each headline was more satisfying than the last, like opening presents on Christmas morning, except the presents were justice and accountability. My phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number, and I considered not answering, but curiosity got the better of me. I picked up and heard the last voice I expected to hear, Richard Harrington himself, sounding like someone had physically removed his spine and replaced it with regret. "Daniel," he said, and his voice was shaky in a way I'd never heard before. Richard had always been confident to the point of arrogance, the kind of guy who thought his voice alone could make stock prices rise. Now he sounded like a man who'd finally looked in the mirror and seen what everyone else had seen all along, a fraud in an expensive suit. "I need to talk to you." "I'm listening," I said, taking a sip of my whiskey and watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. Milton stretched and resettled, completely unconcerned with human drama, as usual. There was a long pause, filled with the sound of Richard trying to figure out what to say to the son-in-law he'd humiliated at a dinner party 2 weeks ago. Finally, he spoke. "You destroyed us. You destroyed everything we built. Everything my family worked for. Everything." "Stop," I said, cutting him off mid-sentence. "Let me save you some time, Richard. I didn't destroy anything. You destroyed it. You built an empire on fraud, laundered money through shell companies, evaded taxes, embezzled from your own business, and treated everyone around you like they existed solely to serve your ego. I just documented it and showed people the truth. You destroyed yourself. I just wrote the press release." Another long pause. Then Richard's voice came back, quieter, defeated. "Was it worth it? Was destroying my family worth whatever satisfaction you got from revenge?" I leaned back in my chair and looked at Milton, who was now grooming himself with that focused intensity that cats bring to personal hygiene. "You know what, Richard? It wasn't about revenge. It was about consequences. You spent your entire life thinking you were above the law because you were rich and connected and important. You fired me at a dinner party because you thought I was expendable. You replaced me with an incompetent parasite because you valued loyalty over competence. You built a company on lies and thought nobody would ever call you on it. So yeah, it was worth it. Not because I destroyed you. You did that yourself. But because for once in your life, you're facing actual consequences for your actions. And that's not revenge. That's just accountability. I could hear Richard breathing on the other end of the line, processing what I'd said, probably realizing that there was no argument he could make that would change anything. I hope you're happy, he finally said, his voice bitter. I'm getting there, I told him honestly. It's a process. But Richard, I sleep great at night. Can you say the same? I didn't wait for an answer. I hung up, blocked the number, and set my phone down on the table. Milton looked at me with those green eyes that somehow conveyed both complete indifference and total understanding. What do you think, buddy? I asked him. Did I do the right thing? Milton yawned, which I decided to interpret as approval. Or maybe he just didn't care. With cats, it's hard to tell. Either way, I finished my whiskey and poured another, watching the last of the sunset fade into twilight. Below me, the city continued on, completely unaware and utterly unconcerned with the corporate drama that had consumed the last few weeks of my life. They'd cut me out of the company 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks. In that time, I'd exposed their fraud, crashed their stock price, triggered multiple federal investigations, gotten divorced, and been rehired at triple my salary to clean up the mess they'd made. The Harrington family had gone from untouchable real estate moguls to front-page cautionary tales. And me? I went from fired son-in-law to the guy who proved that sometimes, just sometimes, the right thing to do is also the most satisfying thing to do. I raised my glass toward the darkening sky in a silent toast. To family loyalty that ends where fraud begins. To consequences finally catching up with people who thought they were immune. To Milton the cat, who'd provided emotional support through complete emotional indifference. And to me, Daniel Price, the whistleblower, the divorced guy, the COO who came back from the dead to haunt the people who'd buried him. Revenge doesn't always need a sword. Sometimes a spreadsheet does the job just fine. At a tense family dinner, my arrogant wife's brother suddenly stood up and screamed, "You stole my wallet and my gold watch, you filthy thief." I denied it, but he smirked, reached into the bag beside me, and triumphantly pulled out his watch and wallet. "See? I knew it was you." He sneered, his voice dripping with mockery. The entire table turned to me in shock. But I couldn't stop laughing. If I had known that marrying Clarissa meant signing up for a lifetime subscription to chaos with a side of judgment, I might have stuck with singlehood and cereal dinners. Don't get me wrong. She's stunning, whip-smart, and can charm a waiter into giving her free dessert, but her family? They're a Broadway show nobody asked for, but can't stop watching. Every Sunday, they gather like it's the Met Gala of dysfunction, and I, Daniel, their token normal guy, get a front row seat. From the first dinner, I knew I'd walked into enemy territory. Picture this, a massive dining room with a chandelier so bright it could guide ships, walls covered in art that probably cost more than my car, and a long mahogany table set like they were expecting royalty, which, judging by their behavior, they thought they were. Clarissa floated through it all in designer heels, every movement practiced like she'd been trained by Vogue. Her brother, Julian, strutted in behind her. Same perfect jawline, same obsession with attention, and the same inability to understand humility. Together, they looked like they'd stepped straight out of a luxury magazine ad titled "The People Who Never Wait in Line." Daniel, darling. Clarissa's mother, Gloria, had trilled that first night, giving me a once-over that felt like a background check. "So lovely to see you again. Oh, you wore that shirt again." She said it with the kind of smile that could double as a weapon. Her husband, Martin, grunted from the head of the table, nursing a glass of scotch that had probably been aged since the Civil War. He was the kind of man who believed emotions were for the weak and that the best solution to any problem involved either money or more scotch. "Sit down, son," he said, though son sounded less affectionate and more like a command issued to a confused intern. And then there was Julian, or as I like to call him, the human ego. He leaned back in his chair, gold watch flashing like a distress signal, smirking as he eyed me. "So, Daniel," he said, "still working at that. What's it called again?" "Oh right, that mechanical place." He made it sound like I fixed toasters for a living instead of designing automotive systems. "Yeah," I said, smiling. "It's called an engineering firm. We make things that actually work. You should try that sometime." Clarissa gave me the "please behave" glare. Gloria gasped like I'd slapped a priest. Julian laughed, but it was the fake kind. All teeth, no warmth. And right then, I understood how this family worked. It wasn't conversation, it was a competition. The goal wasn't connection. It was domination. They bragged about vacations like they were reading stock reports. We just got back from Mykonos, Gloria began. The yacht was small, but quaint. Only 7 bedrooms. I nodded. That's rough. We had to endure the horrors of Chicago traffic last week. Truly humbling. Martin chuckled, the only sound of amusement that didn't feel rehearsed. You've got some wit on you, he said. I smiled, taking it as the highest compliment from a man who looked like he'd rather be golfing than talking. Clarissa, ever the peacemaker, squeezed my hand under the table. They're just being themselves, she whispered. They mean well. Sure, I murmured back. And raccoons mean well when they dig through trash. Dinner rolled on with all the subtlety of a board meeting. Every dish came with a story, not about flavor, but about price. The wine wasn't just wine. It was imported from a private vineyard in Tuscany. The salad wasn't just greens. It was a recipe Gloria learned from a Michelin chef in Paris. Even the bread had a backstory, apparently blessed by a baker with emotional trauma. By dessert, I'd learned that Julian had closed a major business deal. Translation: convinced someone else to invest in his failing startup, and that Clarissa's mother was still recovering from her facelift, which, based on her expressions, hadn't fully rebooted. When the check came, even though, of course, this was their house, Martin insisted on talking about responsibility and earning your place in the world. I nodded politely while he sipped scotch that cost more than my monthly rent. You see, Daniel, he said, men like us provide. We lead. We set examples. I wanted to ask what kind of example it was to treat your wife like an accessory and your son like a trust fund experiment, but I decided to live another day. Absolutely, I said. Leadership is important, especially when you're leading the race to the liquor cabinet. Clarissa kicked me under the table. Hard. Still, I tried to keep the peace. Every week, I'd show up with a smile and the naive hope that maybe this dinner would be normal. Maybe they'd talk about something other than money or reputation. Maybe they'd ask about my life, how work was going, what projects I was building, or how my mother was doing back home. Nope. Instead, Gloria's favorite hobby was polite interrogation. So, Daniel, she'd say sweetly, when are you and Clarissa moving into a real house? Translation: your apartment doesn't have enough chandeliers. Or, when are you planning to start a family? Translation: please produce grandchildren before my Botox wears off. Julian would jump in with his own brand of subtle cruelty. Yeah, bro, when are you going to upgrade your car? I saw a great deal on pre-owned Hondas. I'd grin. You should get one. It'd match your personality. Affordable, but constantly needing attention. Gloria gasped again, as if sarcasm were profanity. Martin smirked. Clarissa sighed. And I kept going, because if you can't laugh at this circus, you might as well cry. It wasn't that I didn't love Clarissa, I did. She had moments of real warmth, when the family noise faded and she could just be herself. She was funny, independent, and secretly hated her brother's antics. But the family's world had gravitational pull, all wealth and vanity and status. You couldn't just orbit it, you got sucked in. And if you weren't careful, it would burn you alive. The funny part? They saw me as the outsider, the simple guy who didn't fit in. They never realized I saw through them better than they saw themselves. I wasn't intimidated by their cars, their gold, or their glass walls. I just found it all exhausting. One evening after yet another dinner filled with humble bragging and fake toasts, Clarissa and I sat in the car, her heels off, her head resting against the window. You're quiet, she said softly. I shrugged. Just wondering if your families ever had a dinner without a plot twist. She laughed, really laughed. They're not that bad. They make reality TV look like therapy sessions. She smiled, tired but affectionate. You know you love me, though. Of course, I said. You're the only reason I haven't fled to Canada. And I meant it. Beneath the glitter and chaos, she was still my person, the woman who made my black coffee taste like something worth getting up for. But her family? They were the tax I had to pay for that love. The next Sunday rolled around. I walked into that house again, smiling like a soldier entering battle. Gloria hugged me, lightly, careful not to wrinkle her dress. Martin grunted his greeting. Julian clapped my back too hard, like he was trying to assert dominance through chiropractic adjustment. Danny boy, he said. Good to see you again. Brought your appetite. Always, I said. Can't wait to taste another meal seasoned with judgment. Clarissa shot me a warning glance, but even she couldn't hide her smile. Dinner began. Gloria talked about her charity work, which, from what I could tell, mostly involved attending luncheons and wearing expensive shoes in photos. Martin discussed his company's expansion, name-dropping CEOs like they were drinking buddies. Julian bragged about his latest business venture, which I'm 90% sure was just flipping sneakers online. Then came the moment of the night. Gloria leaned over and whispered to Clarissa, loud enough for me to hear, "He's not quite what I imagined for you, dear. But he does seem persistent." I smiled sweetly. That's me, a persistent disappointment. The table went silent. Then Martin laughed, a deep, genuine belly laugh that rattled his glass. "You've got spirit, son," he said. "I like that." Gloria pursed her lips. Julian looked offended on her behalf. Clarissa just shook her head, grinning into her wine glass. That was my first real victory. Not approval, exactly, but survival with a touch of pride. I'd made it through another dinner without losing my sanity or flipping the table. As we left that night, Clarissa leaned close and said, "You handled them well tonight." "Thanks," I said, opening the car door for her. "Just another episode of keeping up with the self-absorbed." She laughed. "You're terrible." "Yep," I said, starting the car. "But at least I'm self-aware." And as we drove away from their mansion's glowing facade, I realized something. I wasn't just surviving this circus. I was learning its tricks, the timing, the tone, the masks. Because if I was going to keep my sanity and my marriage, I needed to become the quiet ringmaster of this absurd family show. And trust me, the main act hadn't even started yet. You know how every family has that one person who thinks they're the main character in everyone else's story? Yeah, that's Julian. My brother-in-law, the man who could make a motivational poster about narcissism. If confidence were currency, he'd be a billionaire. Unfortunately, he's broke in actual dollars, but rich in delusion. The man wakes up, looks in the mirror, and probably thanks his reflection for existing. Julian and I have been at odds since day one. It wasn't a dramatic rivalry at first, more like quiet disdain wrapped in forced politeness. But over time, it evolved. He made it his personal mission to test how far my patience could stretch before I applied for sainthood. Every time I think I've hit my limit, he invents new ways to be insufferable. Like the time he gifted me a self-help book titled How to Marry Above Your Level. At Christmas, in front of everyone. The man actually wrapped it with a bow. When I unboxed it, the table erupted in laughter like it was some kind of roast special. Clarissa's mother giggled into her champagne glass. Martin smirked like he was watching a boxing match, and Clarissa, God bless her, she froze with that tight, social smile that says, "Please don't murder my brother at the dinner table." I looked Julian dead in the eyes and said, "Thanks, man. I'll mail you the sequel. How to Stay There Without Begging Your Dad for Rent Money." The silence that followed? Priceless. Even the clock on the wall paused to see what would happen next. Gloria dropped her fork. Martin coughed into his drink to hide a laugh. Clarissa pinched my knee so hard I swear I still have a dent. Julian just blinked at me, probably processing the insult with the same speed as dial-up internet, then gave that trademark smirk. "Good one," he said, but I could tell it burned. The man doesn't like reminders that daddy funds his lifestyle. That should have been the end of it. Normal people would move on. But Julian? No. He doubled down like a Vegas addict on his last chip. From that day, he decided every encounter between us was a competition. A competition for what, you ask? Hell if I know. Respect? Attention? The last brain cell? He's the kind of guy who enters a room like he's announcing a royal decree. Gold chains, cologne so strong you can smell his ego before you see him, and clothes that scream, "I'm allergic to subtlety." He once wore a velvet suit to a barbecue. A barbecue. While I was sweating through a t-shirt flipping burgers, he was posing near the grill like it was Fashion Week. Clarissa says I should try to understand him. Sure. And I should also try to understand tornadoes and why people put pineapple on pizza. Julian's just insecure, she says. You don't have to react every time he says something dumb. I don't react, I argue. I just respond with educational commentary. She rolls her eyes. Your commentary usually involves burning him alive. Hey, I say, that's character development. But the truth is, Julian's arrogance wasn't just annoying, it was strategic. He wanted to remind me that I wasn't one of them. He had grown up cushioned by money and family name. while I'd actually had to earn things. My father was a mechanic, my mother a nurse. We didn't vacation in Greece. We fixed air conditioners and packed school lunches. And I wouldn't trade that for anything. But to Julian, it was a joke, a cute underdog story he could twist into a punchline. The man has a favorite phrase, one he trots out like a slogan. It's not personal, it's just status. No, Julian, it's definitely personal. Anyway, it all came to a head one night when Clarissa told me her parents wanted another peaceful family dinner. She said it like she believed peace was possible with Julian in the room. I laughed so hard I nearly choked on my coffee. Peaceful, I said. In that family, that's like expecting Wi-Fi in a cave. She gave me the classic wife look. Part warning, part pity. Please, Daniel. Just one nice dinner. No sarcasm. No battles. Just smile. Got it, I said. Smile, nod, and pretend I don't hear him breathing arrogance into the air. The night arrived faster than I expected. I stood in front of the mirror adjusting my shirt, telling myself to stay calm. Clarissa looked stunning. Sleek black dress, calm smile, ready to referee another round of the Julian show. Remember, she said, we're doing this for family. Right, I said. Family. The same word cult leaders use. We drove up to their mansion. Yes, mansion, because apparently houses with normal walls are for peasants, and parked next to Julian's gold-trimmed car. I swear the thing looked like it belonged in a rap video. He'd gotten it custom painted, with rims that screamed midlife crisis in progress. Inside, the smell of expensive candles and pretension hit me. Gloria greeted us at the door, dressed like she'd just stepped off a yacht. Daniel, she said, lovely to see you again. I hope you're doing well. I am, I said, still earning my meals the old-fashioned way, with a job. She didn't even flinch. The woman's immune system for sarcasm could rival Kevlar. Julian came in next, flashing that wide grin, his watch practically blinding me. Danny boy, look at you, still rocking the humble middle-class aesthetic. Brave choice. I smiled. Thanks. I call it financial stability. You should try it sometime. Clarissa's elbow found my ribs instantly. Be nice, she whispered through gritted teeth. Julian laughed like I'd just complimented him. Oh, you kill me, man. But really, how's work? Still fixing gears and things? Designing systems, I corrected. The stuff that keeps machines running. You know, functionality, that thing your business lacks. His smirk faltered for half a second. Score 1 for the engineer. Dinner started the way it always does. Fancy wine, overcooked steak, and conversation that felt like a competition for who could sound the most important. Martin talked about quarterly returns like we were his board of directors. Gloria reminisced about charity events where she inspired the less fortunate, which, based on her tone, meant she gave them fashion advice. Then came Julian's moment. So, Daniel, he said, swirling his wine like a villain in a soap opera, have you thought about moving into real estate? There's real money there. I could show you how to play with the big boys. I nearly laughed into my steak. Tempting, I said, but I prefer careers that involve actual work and less Instagram posting. Martin chuckled. Gloria pursed her lips. Clarissa whispered, Daniel, under her breath like a prayer. Julian leaned forward. You think you're better than me? Oh no, I said smoothly. I think I'm safer than you, financially. That hit. He faked a laugh, but his jaw tightened. The man hated being mocked, and I loved free entertainment. Halfway through dinner, he decided to flex again. You know, not everyone can handle this kind of pressure, he said, tapping his glass. Some people just aren't cut out for this lifestyle. Takes real confidence. Confidence or delusion? I asked. Because you've got the second one down cold. He froze, looking like I'd slapped him with a credit score. Clarissa sighed, so loud it could have powered a windmill. Martin choked on his drink, trying not to laugh. Gloria muttered something about manners. And that's the thing. Julian was allergic to being laughed at. He could dish it out all day, but the minute you gave it back, he'd crumble. Not visibly, of course. He'd smile through it, pretending he wasn't bothered, but I could see it in his eyes. He hated that I didn't worship him. The rest of dinner dragged on. He bragged about his connections, name-dropped 2 B-list celebrities, and casually mentioned how money can't buy class, which was ironic, given that he'd clearly been trying to do just that for 30 years. When dessert came, I decided to play nice. You know, Julian, I said, I admire your confidence. He perked up. Thank you, man. Finally, some appreciation. Yeah, I continued. Takes real courage to ignore all the warning signs of self-awareness. The table went dead silent. Then Martin burst out laughing. I like this kid, he said. Julian glared at me. Clarissa groaned. Gloria changed the subject faster than a politician under oath. When dinner finally ended, I stood, thanked Gloria for the meal, and shook Martin's hand. Always a pleasure, I said, which was technically true because I enjoyed surviving. Julian followed me to the door. You think you're funny, huh? I don't think, I said, smiling. I know, but don't worry, you'll catch up someday. His eyes narrowed. You're lucky my sister likes you. Trust me, I said, opening the door. So am I. Clarissa and I got into the car, and she exhaled like she'd just run a marathon. Why do you always have to go toe-to-toe with him? Because he keeps throwing punches, I said. I'm just blocking, creatively. You're impossible. Yeah, but I'm entertaining. Admit it. She tried not to smile. You're a menace. Correction, I said, starting the engine. I'm an engineer. I fix broken systems. Your brother just happens to be one of them. She laughed, finally, and as we pulled out of the driveway, I caught a glimpse of Julian standing by the window, arms crossed, face red. That's when I realized something. He wasn't just arrogant. He was threatened. Because deep down, under the gold watch and empty confidence, Julian knew the truth. I didn't need their world to validate mine. And that, to a man like him, was the biggest insult of all. If there's one thing I've learned from marrying into the Clarissa clan, it's that family dinner is less of a meal and more of a contact sport. Every invitation sounds innocent enough. Just dinner, Daniel. But by dessert, someone's crying, someone's lying, and someone's threatening to disown someone else. It's tradition, like Thanksgiving, but with less gratitude and more emotional warfare. That particular Sunday, Clarissa was unusually cheerful. Always a bad sign. She wore this emerald green dress that screamed, I'm keeping the peace tonight. I was still trying to decide whether to wear armor or to just bring a bottle of bourbon as emotional support. Please, she said as we got in the car, just be nice tonight. Julian's sensitive lately. Sensitive? I scoffed. The guy's ego has its own zip code. The only thing he's sensitive to is not being the center of attention. Daniel, she warned, we're guests. Don't start anything. I never start anything, I said, fastening my seatbelt. I just finish it with better vocabulary. She sighed and turned up the radio, probably praying I'd stay quiet. Spoiler, I didn't. When we pulled up to the mansion, excuse me, family estate, it looked like a museum where no one learns humility. The driveway was lined with imported cars that hadn't seen dirt in years. The front door was open, and the faint sound of laughter and crystal glasses clinking drifted out. I took a deep breath, told myself to behave, and immediately doubted that promise. Inside, it was the usual parade of overcompensation. The dining room looked like something out of Better Homes and People Who Lie About Their Taxes. The chandelier overhead could have paid off my student loans, and the long polished table looked so shiny I could see my reflection, my tired, already annoyed reflection. Clarissa leaned in as we walked in. Smile. I am smiling, I whispered back. On the inside. Deep, deep inside. Martin sat at the head of the table, regal as ever, swirling his scotch like a king debating which peasant to execute. Gloria was next to him, folding napkins with surgical precision, pretending to pray while definitely judging everyone. Across from them sat Julian, staring at his reflection in a spoon. The man looked like he was about to propose to himself. Daniel, Gloria exclaimed. So nice you could join us. Wouldn't miss it, I said. These dinners keep my sarcasm muscles in shape. She blinked. What? Nothing, I said quickly. Just happy to be here. We took our seats. Clarissa smiled politely, and for the first 20 minutes, things were shockingly normal. Martin talked about golf. Gloria bragged about her new yoga instructor. Julian was surprisingly quiet, too busy taking mirror selfies when he thought no one was watching. Even the steak was cooked properly, medium rare, not medium crime scene. For a fleeting second, I thought maybe, just maybe, we'd have one peaceful meal. Then again, I also once thought Julian had maturity potential. I made a lighthearted joke about how Martin's chef must have finally learned how to season food, and Martin actually laughed. Full, hearty, genuine laughter. It was glorious. The cousins cracked smiles. Gloria didn't even correct my table manners. For once, I thought we were having a moment of unity. And then Julian stood up. He didn't just stand up. He slammed his hand on the table like he'd just discovered gravity. My wallet, he yelled. My gold Rolex. They're gone. The sound of forks hitting plates was deafening. Even the air conditioning seemed to pause out of shock. Gone. Gloria gasped, clutching her pearls like she'd just been personally robbed by destiny. Yes. Julian shouted, eyes darting around the table like a cheap detective in a bad soap opera. Someone here took them. I leaned back, sipping my wine, already sensing the punchline. Julian, Martin said sternly. Are you sure you didn't misplace them? Oh, I'm sure, Dad, Julian said, voice dripping with fake confidence. They were right here in my bag. And now? Poof. Gone. I swear to God. The man even made a little poof motion with his hands. I bit my lip to keep from laughing. Calm down, Gloria said. We'll find them. But Julian wasn't calm. He was pacing, muttering, performing for an invisible audience. Then suddenly, his eyes locked on me. Sharp, dramatic, theatric. Daniel. I blinked. Yes. You've been awfully quiet tonight, he said slowly, his voice dripping with implication. Maybe because you're hiding something? I raised a brow. Yeah, a desire to leave. Clarissa's head whipped toward him. Julian, stop it. But he didn't stop. He pointed at me, arm outstretched like he was delivering a Shakespearean accusation. You stole my wallet and my watch. The table collectively gasped. Gloria gasped so hard I thought she'd pull a muscle. Martin froze mid-sip, his scotch glass trembling slightly. Even the cousins stopped pretending to check their phones. Excuse me, I said, half laughing, half insulted. You think I don't play innocent? Julian snapped. You've always been jealous. You mock me, you undermine me, and now you're stealing from me. I blinked, genuinely speechless for a second, not from guilt, but from sheer disbelief at how committed he was to his own delusion. Julian, Clarissa said sharply, that's ridiculous. Is it? He said, pacing like a reality TV villain in mid-breakdown. Because I put my things right here, and now they're gone. Who else would take them? Maybe the housekeeper? I offered helpfully. Or your humility. Oh wait, that's been missing for years. Daniel, Clarissa hissed. But Julian wasn't listening. He was pointing, shouting, performing. Admit it, he yelled. Admit you took them. And I just sat there, staring at this man, this grown adult in a designer suit throwing a tantrum over a watch, and thought, I am living in a live-action cartoon. Okay, I said finally, calm as a monk. Let me get this straight. You're accusing me, your brother-in-law, of stealing your tacky gold watch and that wallet you brag about every 10 minutes. It's not tacky, he barked. Right, I said. It's statement jewelry. The statement being, I make poor financial choices. Martin's lips twitched like he was trying not to laugh. Clarissa looked mortified. Gloria was whispering prayers like she was trying to summon Jesus to mediate. Julian's face turned red, not from guilt, but from frustration that I wasn't taking his Oscar-worthy performance seriously. You think this is funny? He growled. Kind of, I said. I mean, it's not every day I get accused of theft between bites of filet mignon. You're mocking me, he shouted. Not mocking, I corrected. Just documenting. Gloria gasped again, clutching Martin's arm. Martin, say something. Martin sighed, rubbing his temples. Julian, maybe you misplaced it. Let's not start World War III over dinner. I didn't misplace it, Julian yelled. It's gone, and I know who took it. He glared at me again, pure theater in his eyes. You've always hated me, he declared dramatically. You're jealous of me. Jealous, I said, snorting. Of what? Your overdraft fees. The room went silent. You could feel the tension thick enough to butter. Clarissa groaned softly. Julian, please. Sit down. But Julian was committed to the bit now. He slammed both hands on the table and leaned toward me. I want my stuff back. Okay, I said calmly. And I want peace in the Middle East, but we can't always get what we want. Admit it, he shouted again. I didn't take your overpriced jewelry, Julian, I said. But I do admire your creativity. Ever considered community theater? You'd kill as idiot number one. Gloria gasped again. I swear, at this point, she was just gasping out of habit. Martin stood up finally, his voice low and firm. Enough. The room froze. Even Julian shut up. Martin looked between us, disappointment etched into his face like a bad sculpture. Julian, he said, if you have proof, show it. Otherwise, sit down before you embarrass yourself. Oh, I'll show proof. Julian said, smirking now. The kind of smirk that made me instantly suspicious. He reached under the table and grabbed the massive tote bag Clarissa had set down earlier, one of those designer monstrosities that could double as a small suitcase. He crouched down, and I swear the man added dramatic pauses like he was playing to an audience. Then, with all the flair of a magician, he pulled out his gold watch and red leather wallet. The room erupted. Gloria gasped so loudly I thought the chandelier might shatter. Martin's eyes widened. The cousins whispered like they were watching a live scandal unfold. Julian straightened up, holding his items aloft like trophies. "See," he said triumphantly, "right under Daniel's chair. I knew it." Every head turned toward me. Even Clarissa looked stunned, her brows furrowed, confusion and disbelief warring on her face. "Daniel," she said softly. And that's when I felt it, that perfect, ridiculous, cinematic absurdity of the moment. Julian, standing there smug and glowing, holding his own damn belongings he'd just found, trying to frame me like a bad sitcom villain. And you know what I did? I started laughing. Not a polite chuckle, not a nervous giggle. I laughed, full, unfiltered, can't-breathe laughter. Because how could I not? The sheer stupidity of it was art. Everyone stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Julian's face turned redder by the second. "What's so funny, you thief?" I wiped a tear from my eye. "Oh, nothing," I said between breaths. "Just admiring your commitment to fiction. That was one hell of a performance, man." "Daniel," Clarissa snapped. "This isn't funny." "Oh, it's hilarious," I said, still chuckling. The man accused me of theft and then magically found his own stuff under the bag he brought in. Honestly, Julian, you're the most entertaining liar I've ever met. Julian froze. His eyes darted to the bag, then back to me, and I saw it. That flicker of realization that he might have just exposed himself. And that's when I knew. The circus had officially begun. If you've ever seen a grown man fake outrage so convincingly you almost want to hand him an Oscar, then congratulations, you've met my brother-in-law, Julian. The man didn't just accuse me of theft. He delivered the performance of a lifetime, complete with hand gestures, dramatic pauses, and righteous fury that could have fooled a lesser crowd. Unfortunately for him, I have a PhD in spotting BS, earned from years of surviving this family. There we were, frozen around the dining table like extras in a courtroom drama gone off script. Julian stood, one hand clutching the back of his chair, the other pointing directly at me like I'd just robbed Fort Knox. "You stole my Rolex," he said, his voice trembling with fury or bad acting. Hard to tell. "And my wallet. Admit it." For a moment, I just blinked at him, trying to process the absurdity. The man had the emotional range of a toddler who dropped his ice cream. But this was next-level delusion. I leaned back in my chair, folded my arms, and gave him the calmest smile I could muster. "Julian," I said evenly, "the only thing I'm guilty of stealing tonight is your dignity." Gasps. Literal gasps. I swear Gloria clutched her pearls like she was auditioning for Gone with the Wind. Clarissa shot me that look, the one that said, "Daniel, for the love of God, stop being yourself." Julian's nostrils flared. "You think this is a joke?" he barked. "Pretty much, yeah," I said. "And you're killing it. 10 out of 10. Would recommend therapy afterward, though." "Daniel," Gloria snapped. "How dare you mock your brother-in-law during such a serious moment?" I turned to her with my best polite smile. "Mrs. Hart, with all due respect, this serious moment involves your son accusing me of stealing his shiny wrist decoration. Forgive me for not treating it like the Lindbergh kidnapping." Martin sighed deeply, rubbing his forehead like he regretted every decision that led to this dinner. "Julian," he said, voice firm, "if you're going to make accusations, you'd better have proof." "Oh, I've got proof," Julian snapped, slamming his palm on the table again, because apparently subtlety had been outlawed. "I left my things right here by my seat, and now they're gone." Poof. The only person close enough to take them was him. All eyes swung back to me. I could practically hear the suspenseful background music. Clarissa's eyes darted between us like she was watching a tennis match she desperately didn't want tickets to. I took another slow sip of wine. "So, let me get this straight," I said finally. "You're accusing me, your sister's husband, of crawling under this table during dinner, stealing your tacky accessories, and what? Planning to pawn them for gas money." Julian sneered. "You can make jokes all you want, but we all know you've never liked me." Oh, I adore you, I said. You're my favorite example of what not to become. Gloria gasped again. At this point, I was convinced she was doing it for cardio. Julian leaned forward, lowering his voice like we were in some detective film. You've always had something to prove, Daniel. The whole, I'm the self-made man. I don't need your money act. Maybe you finally decided to take what you think you deserve. I blinked, incredulous. You think I'm jealous of your wallet? It's Hermes, he said proudly. Yeah, I said, nodding slowly. And it's still empty. Clarissa groaned under her breath. Can we please not do this here? Julian ignored her. I want you to empty your pockets. That's when I laughed, really laughed. You want me to what now? Empty. Your pockets, he repeated, enunciating each word like he was interrogating a suspect. You know, I said, smiling. I've seen some crazy in my day, but this is a new flavor. What's next? A cavity search. Martin slammed his hand down this time. Enough. Julian, you're making a fool of yourself. Julian rounded on him. Dad, you always take his side. You never believe me. Because you lie more than the White House press office, I muttered. Clarissa kicked me under the table. Stay out of this, Clarissa. Julian snapped, waving a hand at her. You don't know what he's capable of. Oh, I do, she said dryly. He's capable of fixing engines and paying bills. You should try it sometime. That earned her a death glare. The tension in the room was so thick it could have been sliced with one of Gloria's monogrammed butter knives. I decided to twist the knife, metaphorically, of course. Julian, I said calmly, if I wanted to steal something from you, it wouldn't be your watch. It'd be your self-confidence. But unfortunately, that thing's too big to carry. The cousins snorted into their napkins. Even Martin's mouth twitched. Julian turned crimson. You think you're clever? No, I said. I know I'm clever. You just make me look like Einstein. He looked ready to explode. That's it, he yelled. We're searching everything. The table, the bags, the... Fine, I said, shrugging. Search away. But when you don't find anything, I expect a written apology and maybe a fruit basket. Julian smirked, that oily confidence slipping back into place. Oh, I'll find something. He stalked around the table like a cartoon villain, scanning for evidence. Then, with the dramatic flair of a magician mid-act, he crouched beside the chairs Clarissa and I had been sitting in. His hand dove toward the designer tote bag sitting between us. One of those ridiculous ones that cost more than my first car. He reached in, rustled around, and then, with triumphant glee, pulled out his gold Rolex and red leather wallet. Uh-huh, he shouted, brandishing them like trophies. Found them, just where I thought they'd be. The room erupted. Gasps, whispers, the whole Greek chorus of judgment. Gloria clutched her chest like she'd just watched a murder. Martin's face went from shock to disappointment faster than you can say family therapy. Daniel, Gloria whispered, horrified. How could you? I just stared, blinking slowly, letting the absurdity wash over me like bad soap opera lighting. Julian stood there, grinning ear to ear, like a toddler who'd just discovered lying could get him candy. See, he said. I knew it. You thought you could embarrass me, but now everyone knows who you really are. I couldn't help it. A laugh burst out before I could stop it. Oh, buddy, I said, shaking my head. You really picked the wrong career path. You should have gone into acting. His grin faltered. Excuse me. I mean it, I said, chuckling. The way you sold that fake outrage. Brilliant. The timing, the delivery, chef's kiss. Only problem? You forgot your prop placement. Clarissa blinked at me. Daniel, what are you talking about? I leaned back in my chair, still smiling. That's not our bag. Julian froze. What? That tote? I said, pointing. That's his bag. The same one he brought in, set down by my chair when he went to the bathroom earlier. I watched him do it. Guess he got a little too into his performance and forgot which side he left it on. The silence that followed could have powered a meditation app. Julian's confident smirk evaporated. His eyes darted to the bag, then to me, then back to the bag like he was running through excuses in real time. Gloria blinked rapidly. Julian, is that true? He stammered. No, I must have. He's lying. Am I? I said, smiling. Because you've got about 6 cameras in this house, right, Martin? I'm sure one of them caught this little episode in glorious 4K. Martin's brows furrowed. The dining room camera. He turned to his son, voice low and deadly. Julian, did you move that bag? Julian's throat bobbed. Well, maybe I. Maybe you what? Martin snapped. Julian hesitated, then puffed up his chest. This is ridiculous. You're all just trying to make me look crazy. Oh, honey, Gloria said softly. You're doing that yourself. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. Tell you what, Julian. Let's check the footage. If I'm guilty, I'll personally walk myself to the police station. But if you're lying, I paused, savoring the silence. You're apologizing. In writing, preferably on company letterhead. Clarissa shot me a look that was half stop and half please let this happen. Julian opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked around for an ally. Any ally. But even his mother had retreated into disappointed silence. Martin rose from his chair, tall and furious, and said, Stay here. I'll pull the footage. Julian tried to protest, but Martin's glare shut him down faster than bad Wi-Fi. The patriarch marched off toward his study, leaving behind a silence that could have been sliced with a steak knife. Julian sat back down, fuming. I watched him stew, sipping my wine like this was the best dinner entertainment I'd ever had. Clarissa leaned toward me and whispered, Are you sure about this? Oh, absolutely, I said. I'm dying to see how my theft career unfolds on video. 10 long minutes later, Martin returned, holding a tablet. Everyone, he said, voice cold as winter. You might want to see this. He pressed play. There it was, clear as day. Julian, mid-conversation, slipping off his Rolex, setting it gently into his own bag. Then, moments later, placing that same bag down beside my chair before heading to the bathroom. No one else touched it. No one else even came near it. When the clip ended, the silence was glorious. You could hear Julian's reputation packing its bags and leaving the country. Martin set the tablet down with a soft thunk. Julian, he said quietly, you owe your brother-in-law an apology. Julian's face went pale. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again, like a fish gasping for air, and then muttered, It was a mistake. No, I said, standing slowly. A mistake is forgetting your keys. This was a stunt. Clarissa put a hand over her face. Gloria whispered, Lord, why is my son dumb? And me? I smiled. Well, I said, picking up my napkin, this has been the most entertaining dinner I've ever attended. Next week, let's do karaoke. Maybe Julian can perform Blame It on the Boogie. Martin actually laughed, a deep, relieved sound. Even Gloria cracked a smile through her embarrassment. Clarissa shot me a look that said not now, but the damage was done. Julian sat there, stewing in humiliation, and for once, I didn't feel like the outsider in this family. Because the truth had finally taken a seat at the table, and it looked damn good next to my wine glass. I've been through awkward family dinners before, the kind where someone mentions politics or grandma decides to critique everyone's life choices. But nothing, and I mean nothing, compares to watching your brother-in-law accuse you of theft and then discover the evidence like he's starring in an off-brand courtroom drama. So when Julian stood there holding his gold watch and red wallet like trophies, waiting for applause, I didn't flinch. I just sat back, folded my napkin, and said the most dangerous phrase a calm man can say. Please, continue embarrassing yourself. I love live theater. The room went quiet. Clarissa's mouth hung open. Gloria's hand froze halfway to her pearls. Martin's scotch was halfway to his lips, and even the chandelier seemed to lean in for the gossip. Julian smirked like he'd just cracked a case for CSI, Family Edition. Explain this, he demanded, waving the watch. I looked at it, then at him. Sure, that's your wrist bling. Congratulations, you found it. The mystery is solved. Can we get back to dinner before the steak needs resuscitation? His eyes narrowed. Don't play dumb. It was in your bag. My bag. I said. You mean the one that doesn't belong to me? He sneered. Nice try. Oh, buddy, I said. If I wanted a watch that screams compensating, I'd buy one myself. With cash, not daddy's credit card. Gloria gasped so loud I thought she might need oxygen. Clarissa groaned. Martin muttered something like, For God's sake. Julian puffed out his chest. You always have something smart to say, don't you? Only because everything you say begs for a smarter response, I said. The cousins at the far end of the table were pretending not to listen, but their smirks gave them away. Julian noticed too. His ears turned red, never a good sign. You think this is funny? He snapped. Honestly, I said, taking a sip of wine. A little. I mean, how often do you get publicly framed by a guy who can't spell subtle? Clarissa's hand shot to my arm. Daniel, she whispered, please. I turned to her and smiled sweetly. I'm calm. Look at me, the picture of Zen. He's the one yelling like a guy who just realized he's not the favorite child. Martin cleared his throat. Julian, sit down. No. Julian barked, still waving the evidence like a victory flag. He's not getting away with this. I saw the watch under his chair. His bag. His side of the table. What else do you need? I leaned back. I don't know, maybe logic? Evidence that wasn't planted by a man who still uses his parents' Netflix account. Julian's jaw dropped. Are you calling me a liar? I'm calling you a creative writer, I said. You should send this script to Netflix. Title it The Man Who Framed Himself. The sound that came out of Gloria was somewhere between a gasp and a squeak. Enough, both of you. She said, we're guests in this house, Daniel. Actually, I said, it's their house. I'm the unpaid entertainment. Clarissa rubbed her temples like she was counting down to her next therapy session. Julian, she said sharply, stop this. If you think he took your things, then think, he interrupted. I know he did. He lifted the wallet for dramatic effect. My initials, my cards, my cash, right here, all hidden under his chair. I stared at him, then at the wallet, then at Clarissa. You know what's sad? I said quietly. He actually rehearsed that line in his head, probably in the mirror while moisturizing. Julian slammed the wallet on the table, rattling the silverware. You think you're better than me. No, I said. I just think I'm not you. That got a choked laugh from one of the cousins before Gloria's death. Glare shut it down. Julian turned to his parents, desperate for backup. You see? You see what he does? The disrespect, the arrogance. Martin cut him off with a raised hand. Julian, you've made your point. Sit down before I lose my patience. But Julian wasn't finished. Dad, he's mocking me. In our own home. I smiled. Technically, I'm mocking you and your home. Equal opportunity, you know? Clarissa groaned. Daniel, please. Hey, I said, shrugging. I'm innocent until proven, Julian. Julian pointed at me again, like the world's angriest mall cop. You think you can get away with this? Get away with what? I asked. Being better dressed than you? You planted my things, he shouted. Wow, I said. So I broke into your imagination now? Cool. That's when Gloria decided to intervene, or at least to make things worse. Martin, she said, voice trembling with faux concern. Maybe we should call someone. A private investigator, perhaps? Or an exorcist, I muttered. Whatever gets him to stop talking. Martin gave me a warning look, but I could see the faintest twitch of amusement behind his eyes. For once, he wasn't taking his son's side, and Julian knew it. His voice rose, cracking with indignation. You all think this is a joke, but I know what I saw. Do you? I asked. Because what I saw was you coming back from the bathroom, shoving your bag right under my chair. Then 5 minutes later, surprise, you found your stuff there. Incredible. It's like you're your own magician. Now all you need is a rabbit and self-awareness. Clarissa covered her mouth to hide her smile. Daniel, she hissed, stop. No, I said. I'm invested now. I want to see how far this plot goes. Maybe next week he'll accuse me of stealing his personality. Although, to be fair, that'd be a mercy theft. Julian's face went crimson. That's it, he snapped. You're done here. He grabbed the bag, the supposed crime scene, and held it high. Everyone saw it. The evidence speaks for itself. Yeah, I said. It says made in Italy and property of an idiot. Martin stood abruptly, chair scraping the floor. Julian, enough. Sit down before you embarrass yourself further. Julian froze, then slowly turned toward him. Dad, you don't believe him over me, do you? Martin's expression was flat, unreadable. Right now, I believe you're acting like a fool. Gloria gasped again, whispering, Martin, but he ignored her. Julian's mouth opened and closed a few times like a fish in a panic. You always take his side. He's an outsider. He doesn't belong here. I stood up slowly. You're right, I said. I don't belong here. Because unlike you, I work for a living. I pay my bills. I don't measure my worth by how much metal I hang off my wrist. Then leave, he shouted. Get out. Gladly, I said. But you might want to check your security cameras first. Just so you can replay the part where you planted your own evidence like a toddler staging a heist. That landed like a grenade. Every head turned toward Julian. He blinked. What are you talking about? You heard me, I said. You've got cameras all over this house. The fancy kind with night vision and motion sensors, right? Let's see what they caught. Maybe you'll even get your big moment on tape. You can call it the idiot and the empty wallet. Clarissa whispered, Daniel, don't. But Martin was already nodding slowly. He's right. We'll check the footage. Julian froze. There's no need. Oh, there's every need, Martin said sharply. I'm tired of this nonsense. He turned to one of the cousins. Robert, go to my study and pull up the dining room feed from tonight. Julian started sweating. Dad, come on. That's ridiculous. It's a waste of time. Then you've got nothing to worry about, I said. Clarissa's hand found mine under the table, a quiet mix of support and warning. I gave her a small squeeze that said, don't worry, I've got this. Robert returned a few minutes later, holding Martin's tablet. He set it down in front of him, pressed play, and turned the screen so everyone could see. And there it was, Julian, earlier in the evening, removing his watch and wallet from his pocket, dropping them neatly into his own designer bag. Then, right before heading to the bathroom, setting that bag down beside my chair. Clear as day, the silence that followed could have cured hiccups worldwide. Martin's jaw clenched. Gloria's hand fell away from her pearls. Clarissa exhaled slowly, a sound halfway between relief and disbelief. Julian's eyes darted everywhere but the screen. That's not what it looks like. Really, I said. Because it looks exactly like what I said it was, a one-man production of How to Frame Your Brother-in-Law. Martin turned to him. Julian, apologize. Julian sputtered. Dad, now. He looked at me, hatred burning behind his eyes, and muttered. Fine. Sorry. I smiled. Wow. Sincere. Almost sounded like you meant it. Gloria tried to smooth things over. Let's all just calm down. Oh, I'm calm, I said. I've been calm since the moment he called me a thief. Because deep down, I knew something. Stupid always exposes itself. You just have to give it time. Clarissa gave me a look, that half-warning, half-admiring one she does when she knows I'm right, but wishes I wasn't enjoying it so much. Julian sank back into his chair, sulking. The cousins whispered to each other. Martin sighed and poured himself another drink. After a long pause, he looked at me and said quietly, Daniel, I owe you an apology as well. No worries, I said. I get it. Every family needs a scapegoat. I'm just glad the goat finally kicked back. Clarissa laughed despite herself, hiding it behind her hand. Gloria stood and declared the evening over, clearly desperate to restore some dignity to the ruins. Well, she said tightly, I think that's quite enough excitement for one night. Agreed, I said, rising. Next time let's just play Monopoly. Less chance of a felony accusation. Julian muttered something under his breath. I didn't bother asking what. I'd already won. As Clarissa and I walked out, Martin stopped me at the door. For what it's worth, he said quietly. Thank you for keeping your cool. I smiled. Cool's easy when the truth's on your side. Clarissa and I climbed into the car, the night air finally free of perfume, tension, and bad acting. She turned to me, eyes tired but amused. You shouldn't have laughed, she said. I know, I replied. But come on, you have to admit, it was funny. She chuckled, shaking her head. You're impossible. And you married me anyway. As we drove away, I looked back at the glowing mansion shrinking in the rearview mirror, that glittering palace of chaos. Somewhere inside, Julian was probably rewriting history in his head, convincing himself he was still the victim. But the footage didn't lie. And that night, as far as I was concerned, justice had better lighting than the chandelier. You know that kind of laugh that just slips out before your brain can stop it, the one that starts in your chest and turns into a full-body event? Yeah, that's what happened. The second Julian triumphantly pulled his missing gold Rolex and red wallet out from the designer bag he himself had planted, my body decided it was comedy hour. I didn't plan it. I didn't mean to humiliate him. But once it started, it was unstoppable. I was gone. It began as a small chuckle, quiet, restrained, maybe even forgivable. But then the absurdity of the whole thing hit me like a truck full of irony, and I just lost it. I mean, come on. The man accused me of theft, held his own bag like Exhibit A, and thought he'd just cracked a case for the FBI. I couldn't breathe. I leaned back in my chair, hand over my face, and laughed like the universe itself had decided to roast him through me. Everyone stared. Forks hovered midair. The chandelier sparkled judgment. Clarissa's eyes went wide. That dear God My husband's about to start a war, look. Gloria clutched her pearls like she was trying to resuscitate them. Martin looked half amused, half horrified, like he wanted to laugh, but was afraid of losing his inheritance. And Julian? His face turned so red I thought he might explode and redecorate the wallpaper in ego. What's so funny, you thief? Julian barked. That only made me laugh harder. Oh, I managed between breaths. Nothing. Nothing at all. Just admiring your acting skills, man. You should really try out for community theater. You'd make a fantastic idiot number one. Clarissa gasped. Daniel. Really? I said, grinning. Because the man accusing me of theft just planted his own jewelry in his bag and forgot which side of the table it was on. I mean, come on. You can't write this stuff. Julian blinked, completely thrown. What? Yeah, I said, still half laughing. That's your bag, genius. The same one you dumped under my chair after your bathroom break. I saw you shuffle like a raccoon hiding trash. Seriously, you had the subtlety of a toddler with chocolate on his face saying, I didn't eat the cookies. The cousins at the far end of the table snorted into their drinks. One actually choked. Even Martin covered his mouth, pretending to cough. Gloria's lips moved silently, either praying or cursing, hard to tell which. Julian's face twisted, his confidence slipping like butter on a hot pan. You're lying. About what? I said, physics? Because unless that bag teleported itself from your seat to mine, I think we both know the truth. Clarissa buried her face in her hands. Please stop. Oh no, I said, still grinning. We've come too far. I want to see how this episode ends. Maybe there'll be a cliffhanger where he accuses me of stealing his common sense next. Julian's jaw clenched. You think you're funny, huh? I know I'm funny, I said. You just keep providing the material. The cousins burst out laughing now, unable to help themselves. Gloria shot them a death glare sharp enough to pierce armor. This is not funny, she hissed. On the contrary, I said, wiping a tear from my eye. This is the funniest thing that's ever happened at this table, and I once watched Martin try to explain crypto. Martin chuckled despite himself. That's fair. Julian slammed his hand on the table again, rattling the silverware. Shut up. I tilted my head. Why? You're doing great. Keep digging. Dad. Julian turned to Martin, desperate for backup. Are you seriously just going to let him disrespect me like this? Martin sighed, looking more exhausted than angry. Julian, for God's sake, you made a fool of yourself. Just let it go. Julian's mouth fell open. You're taking his side? His side. Martin snapped. I'm taking the side of logic. You accused him of theft, and then found your own stuff. How do you expect anyone to believe you? That's not what happened. Julian protested. He planted them. Oh my God, I said, laughing again. Dude, the gaslighting is Olympic level. You should get a medal. Gloria's eyes darted between us. Boys, please. But there was no stopping it now. Julian stood up so fast his chair toppled backward. You all think this is funny? You think I'm stupid? I smiled. We don't think, Julian. We know. The cousins lost it. One laughed so hard, he actually snorted wine through his nose. Gloria groaned. Martin, do something. Martin held up his hand. Julian, sit down before you embarrass yourself further. I'm not embarrassed. Julian shouted. His voice cracked halfway through, not helping his case. He's twisting everything. Buddy, I said, still leaning back with my arms crossed. No one needs to twist anything. You're already spinning. Clarissa whispered, Daniel, please, but I was too far gone. Julian started pacing around the table like a trapped tiger, muttering under his breath. You people never take me seriously. You always side with him. He's the outsider. He doesn't belong here. True, I said. I don't belong here. I belong somewhere sane. You're smug, he yelled, pointing a shaking finger at me. You think because you've got your little engineering job and your self-righteous attitude that you're better than me. I shrugged. Not better. Just less desperate. He lunged forward, but Martin slammed his palm on the table. Enough. His voice was sharp, commanding. Julian, sit down now. Julian hesitated, eyes darting from his father to me to Clarissa, who was visibly mortified. Then, like a sulking teenager, he kicked his chair upright and dropped into it, arms crossed, glaring daggers. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the chandelier. Everyone stared at their plates like the food might suddenly start explaining the meaning of life. I cleared my throat. So, I said lightly, does anyone want dessert? I hear tiramisu pairs great with humiliation. Clarissa kicked me under the table, so hard my soul left my body for a second. I looked at her and mouthed, "What?" Gloria tried to salvage the evening. "Let's all take a breath," she said, her voice trembling but polite. "There's no need to." "Oh, there's a need," I said. "Because apparently, I'm a jewel thief now. I might as well lean in." Julian glared at me. "You're mocking me." "Yes," I said. Efficiently, too. Martin actually chuckled, shaking his head. "You really can't help yourself, can you, Daniel?" "Nope," I said. "It's a gift." Clarissa whispered, "It's a problem." Julian slammed his napkin on the table. "I'm done. I don't need to sit here and be insulted." "Then don't," I said cheerfully. "Standing might help circulation." He stood again, red-faced. "You think you're clever?" "I don't think," I said. "I've been told repeatedly." That one made even Gloria cover her mouth. She tried to hide it, but the corners of her lips betrayed her. Julian turned toward his father one last time, voice shaking. "You're really just going to let him talk to me like this?" Martin sighed. "Julian, you dug this hole. Daniel just put up the scenic view sign." The room broke into scattered laughter. Gloria actually let out a small chuckle before catching herself. The cousins were barely holding it together. Clarissa, despite herself, cracked the tiniest smile. And Julian, poor, humiliated Julian, grabbed his bag, his evidence, and stormed toward the door. "I'm leaving," he shouted. "I don't have to take this. Promise." I called after him. He froze at the doorway, turned around, and glared at me with the fury of a man who just realized the Wi-Fi password changed without him. "You're not welcome in this family anymore." I smiled. "You say that like it's bad news." He stormed out, the door slamming so hard it rattled the chandelier. For a second, the whole room stayed frozen in stunned silence. Then, slowly, Clarissa lowered her hands and looked at me with a mixture of disbelief and exasperation. "You couldn't stop yourself, could you?" she asked. I shrugged. He accused me of being a thief in front of his parents and tried to frame me with his own bag. "You expect me to just, what?" "Nod politely." "You laughed," she said. "You laughed at him." "I laughed at the situation," I corrected. The situation happened to include him. Martin exhaled, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Well," he said, "that was something." Gloria sighed dramatically. "Julian will calm down eventually." "Eventually," I repeated, nodding. "Sure. Like global warming." That earned a few stifled laughs from the cousins again. Martin poured himself another drink and looked at me, something like approval glinting behind the exhaustion in his eyes. "You handled yourself well, son," he said. "Thank you," I said. "It's all those years of watching courtroom dramas. You learn to keep your composure when idiots start monologuing." Clarissa groaned. "Can we not compare my brother to a TV defendant?" "Fine," I said. "He's more like a bad witness. Overacts, contradicts himself, cries for sympathy." She gave me a side eye that said you're sleeping on the couch, but she couldn't fully hide her amusement either. Martin raised his glass. "To surviving another Hart family dinner," he said dryly. I lifted mine. Barely. We clinked glasses, and even Gloria joined in, though her smile was tight. "Let's not tell the neighbors about this one," she said. "No promises," I muttered. As the tension finally began to melt, dessert arrived. Tiramisu, just as I joked. Gloria insisted on serving it herself, probably as a peace offering or an attempt to reassert control of the evening. "Here," she said, placing a slice in front of me. "Consider this compensation for emotional damage." I grinned. "I'll take it. And maybe a gift card for therapy." Clarissa nudged me. "Stop it." "What?" "I'm healing through humor." And so we sat there, awkwardly but peacefully, chewing through silence and sugar. Julian's absence was the sweetest flavor of the night. The storm had passed, and for the first time since I married into this circus, I didn't feel like the outsider, just the only one willing to call it like it was. When we finally left, Clarissa was quiet on the drive home. I glanced at her, half expecting a lecture. Instead, she smiled faintly. "You know," she said, "you might actually be the sanest one in that family." I laughed softly. "That's the scariest thing you've ever said." And with that, the night ended the same way it began. Absurd, exhausting, and somehow hilarious. Because when your brother-in-law tries to frame you for theft and ends up exposing himself instead, laughter isn't just appropriate. It's justice with better timing. You ever experience a moment so satisfying it feels like the universe just handed you popcorn and said, "Sit back, this one's for you"? That was me, sitting at that long, overly polished table, watching Julian's empire of lies start to wobble like Jell-O at a kid's birthday party. I didn't even have to say anything. Gravity was doing the work for me. After my laugh fest and his dramatic exit, the room sat in this kind of stunned silence. The kind where everyone pretends they're deep in thought, but are really just replaying the chaos in their heads. Clarissa still looked mortified, but she was starting to realize what I'd already known. Julian had dug his own grave and was about to lie in it, designer suit and all. Martin cleared his throat, breaking the silence like a judge ready to deliver a verdict. "All right," he said, his tone flat but dangerous. "Since there seems to be confusion about what happened here, we're settling this the simple way." Julian froze mid-step, halfway to the door. "What way?" Martin leaned back in his chair, calm as a chess master. "The cameras." You could have heard a pin drop. Gloria's fork clinked against her glass. Clarissa inhaled sharply. "And Julian?" "Well," Julian turned the color of unripe tomatoes. He stammered. "The cameras?" "Yes," Martin said evenly. "You remember, after that little wine cellar incident, we installed full security coverage, dining room included. You'd know that if you paid attention to something other than your reflection. I swear the collective gasp in that room could have powered Chicago." Julian tried to laugh it off. "Dad, come on. You don't really think." Martin raised a hand. "Enough. I'll check the footage myself." Julian started sweating bullets. The man went from confident to clammy in 5 seconds flat. "That's unnecessary," he said, voice pitching higher. "I mean, it's obvious what happened here. The evidence speaks for itself." "Exactly," I said, smiling. "Let's hear it speak in 1080p. Clarissa covered her face again. Gloria muttered something that sounded like, "Lord, give me patience," though honestly, at that point, divine intervention might have needed patience with her son. Martin stood, the embodiment of old-school authority, and left for his study. "Stay here," he said over his shoulder. "I'll be back in 5 minutes." The moment he disappeared, Julian spun toward me, whisper shouting, "You set me up." I nearly laughed in his face. "Oh, right, because I hacked your house cameras between courses." "Sure thing, Sherlock." His eyes darted between me, Clarissa, and his mother. "You're all against me." Gloria sighed. "Julian, please stop talking. I'm not the bad guy here," he snapped. "He's been provoking me since the day he married Clarissa." I grinned. "Provoking? No, Julian. You provoke yourself. I just provide commentary." He pointed at me, shaking. "You think you're clever, don't you?" "Actually," I said, leaning back, "I know I am. You, on the other hand, should consider switching from crime dramas to reality TV. Might be less confusing." Clarissa groaned softly. "Both of you stop. Please. Let Dad handle it." "Handle what?" Julian muttered. "A misunderstanding?" I tilted my head. "A misunderstanding where you accused your brother-in-law of grand larceny over dinner? Sure, let's call that a mix-up." Before he could respond, Martin's footsteps echoed back through the hall. He returned holding his tablet, face unreadable. He sat down at the head of the table and tapped the screen. "I've reviewed the footage," he said. Julian swallowed audibly. "And?" Martin turned the tablet toward him. "And you might want to explain this." He hit play. There it was, crystal clear, high definition, no room for excuses. Julian, strutting into the dining room earlier that evening, his gold watch glinting like a disco ball. He chatted, checked his reflection in a spoon. Then, and here's the magic part, took off the watch and wallet, tucked them neatly into his own bag, and then, before heading to the bathroom, leaned down and slid that same bag right under my chair. Smooth as wet sandpaper. Clarissa's jaw dropped. Gloria gasped. Of course she did. One cousin muttered, "Holy crap." When the clip ended, the silence that followed was art. If peace had a sound, it would have been that, the sound of Julian's credibility flatlining. Martin slowly set the tablet down. "So," he said softly, "would you like to explain that?" Julian opened and closed his mouth a few times, like a goldfish realizing it had no castle left. That's not. It's not what it looks like." Gloria whispered. "It looks like stupidity." "Exactly," I said, grinning. "A perfect visual representation of it." Martin's gaze sharpened. "Julian, do not insult this family's intelligence any further." Julian floundered. It was, I must have forgotten which bag was mine. Oh really? I said. You forgot which designer bag you brought yourself? That's wild. Happens to me all the time with my plastic grocery sacks. Clarissa's lips twitched. She tried to hold it in, but a small laugh escaped. That laugh was the sound of oxygen returning to the room. Gloria crossed her arms, disappointment carved deep in her face. Julian, I raised you better than this. No, you didn't, I muttered. Daniel, Clarissa warned quietly. What? I'm helping, I said. Moral support. Martin leaned forward, his voice low but thunderous. Julian, apologize. Right now. Julian looked at me, eyes burning, pride bleeding out of him. Dad, now, Martin repeated. Julian hesitated, every muscle in his face twitching like it physically hurt to admit he was wrong. I'm sorry, he muttered. I cupped a hand to my ear. Sorry what? I didn't quite hear the part where you say. Daniel, I falsely accused you of theft because I'm a drama queen with impulse control issues. Clarissa kicked me under the table again, but Martin actually cracked a smile. He's not wrong, he said. Julian's head snapped toward him, betrayal flashing across his face. You're taking his side? I'm taking the side of reality, Martin said. Something you might want to try visiting once in a while. The cousins were laughing now, quietly, but enough to make Julian's face turn the color of raw steak. Gloria whispered, Julian, maybe take a walk. No, Martin said firmly. He's staying. He's going to sit here and learn what happens when you let arrogance drive the car. Julian looked down at his plate like it had personally wronged him. I almost felt bad for him, almost. But then I remembered being called a thief in front of the entire family, and that sympathy evaporated faster than his credibility. I leaned back, smirking. You know, I've got to admit, the plot twist was solid. The build-up, the false accusation, the dramatic reveal, all very cinematic. Just next time, maybe don't star in your own downfall. Clarissa groaned. Daniel, please. Come on. I said, it's funny. Even your dad thinks it's funny. Martin poured himself another drink. I do, actually. Gloria sighed into her napkin. This family is exhausting. I nodded. Amen. Julian muttered something under his breath that sounded suspiciously like pathetic. Sorry, what was that? I asked. Nothing, he snapped. Martin shot him another glare. You'll do nothing except apologize properly and make amends. Julian shifted in his chair. What do you want me to say? How about the truth? I said. It's new for you, but I hear it's therapeutic. Clarissa smacked my leg under the table. Stop antagonizing him. I'm not antagonizing, I said. I'm narrating. Julian finally exhaled, slumping. Fine. I overreacted. I shouldn't have accused you. I nodded. And he gritted out. I'm sorry. Better, I said. Now add. And I'll cover the dry cleaning bill for all the tension you spilled at dinner. Daniel, Clarissa said, her tone half warning, half defeated. I grinned and raised my glass. To closure. Martin clinked his scotch against mine. To cameras, he said. They don't lie. Gloria shook her head but smiled despite herself. Even Clarissa relaxed a little, leaning back in her chair. The tension that had strangled the room finally started to loosen its grip. Julian sat in silence, sulking like a man forced to sit through his own roast. The cousins whispered and giggled quietly. The air felt lighter now, almost celebratory. Finally, Martin stood, holding his glass high. Well, he said, I think that's enough drama for one night. Let's all take a moment to appreciate that truth, in the end, always finds its way out, even when some of us try to bury it under a designer tote bag. Laughter rippled around the table. Even Gloria cracked a tiny smile. Julian mumbled, This isn't over. I raised my eyebrows. Oh, it absolutely is. The credits are rolling, my friend. You can't come back from being caught on tape. Clarissa whispered, Please don't make it worse. I'm not, I said softly. I'm just basking. When we finally stood to leave, Julian avoided eye contact. He muttered another half-hearted apology, but it came out sounding like he was allergic to humility. I patted him on the shoulder. Hey, no hard feelings. Mistakes happen. You mistook your own bag for mine, your pride for evidence, and your brain for optional equipment. We've all been there. Clarissa tugged my arm. Daniel. What? I'm being gracious. As we walked out, Martin caught my arm and leaned in slightly. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I appreciate how you handled that. Most men would have lost their temper. I smiled. Oh, I lost it, just internally, where it's healthier and funnier. He chuckled. You've got a good head on your shoulders. Don't let my son drag you into his nonsense. Trust me, I said, glancing back at Julian's sulking figure. I wouldn't follow him into a free sample line. That made Martin laugh, really laugh, for the first time that night. And in that moment, I realized something. I didn't have to prove myself to this family anymore. They'd just seen everything they needed to know, not just about me, but about Julian. As we stepped out into the cool night air, Clarissa looked at me, half exasperated, half amused. You know, she said, you could have handled that with a little less sarcasm. Sure, I said, and he could have handled it with a little more honesty. She sighed but smiled. You're impossible. Yep, I said, taking her hand. But I'm also innocent. And according to the footage, extremely photogenic. She laughed, that real, relieved laugh I hadn't heard all evening. And as we drove away, I looked back at the mansion glowing behind us, thinking about the irony of it all. For once, the truth didn't just set me free, it embarrassed the hell out of the right person. And that, my friends, is the kind of justice you don't need a judge for, just a good camera and impeccable timing. There are bad nights, and then there are nights where your brother-in-law gets caught red-handed on video, trying to frame you for theft, and the entire family watches it in glorious HD. I thought that would be the end of it, a little embarrassment, a forced apology, and then back to pretending we all liked each other. I was wrong, because Julian Hart doesn't do humility. He does denial, loud, public, and preferably with an audience. The moment Martin put down the tablet, the room went from silent tension to live volcano. Julian's face turned the color of an overripe tomato. He jumped up so fast his chair nearly toppled. That's not what it looks like, he shouted. I sighed. You keep saying that, man, but it literally looks exactly like what it is. Shut up, he barked, pointing at me. His voice cracked halfway through the word, which really killed the intimidation factor. You've twisted everything. Clarissa groaned softly beside me. Gloria whispered something like a prayer, though I think it was actually, Lord, please make him stop talking. Martin stayed seated, calm but clearly done with the performance. Julian, he said, his tone like a quiet storm. You need to stop. Oh, I see. Julian snapped, pacing like a cornered cat. Now I'm the bad guy. I'm the villain because I made one mistake. One mistake, I said, raising an eyebrow. You falsely accused me of theft in front of your whole family, planted your own watch like a magician on crack, and then doubled down when the cameras caught you. That's not a mistake, that's a career. The cousins at the far end of the table snorted. One tried to hide his laugh behind a napkin. Julian spun on me. You think you're funny, don't you? I don't think, I said. The evidence speaks for itself. Daniel, Clarissa hissed. Please. But I couldn't resist. I'm sorry, I said, holding up my hands. He's just such a gift. You can't script this level of delusion. Julian's eyes went wild. You smug. He stopped himself, glancing at his father. You know what, fine. Everyone always takes his side. The outsider. The working-class hero. Well, congratulations, Daniel, you win. You always do, don't you? I blinked. Wait, when have I ever won? All I've done is survive your dinner parties. He ignored me. You think you're better than me because you've got your little job and your moral superiority, but you'll never be one of us. I laughed. Julian, I don't want to be one of you. I enjoy paying my taxes. Martin's mouth twitched like he was fighting the urge to laugh. Gloria, however, was one deep breath away from fainting. Boys, she cried, her pearls practically clacking in distress. This is not the time. Julian slammed his hands on the table, rattling the cutlery. You humiliated me. I leaned forward, resting my chin on my hand. Actually, you did that yourself. I just provided commentary. Think of me as your narrator. Only funnier and less forgiving. He growled, literally growled, like a dog seeing the mailman. You've been jealous of me since day one. I blinked. Jealous? Of you? My guy, the only thing I envy about you is how you can afford therapy and still not use it. That got a few muffled laughs from the cousins again. Even Clarissa's lips twitched. Julian noticed. Big mistake. Oh, you think this is funny too? He shouted at her. You're defending him, aren't you? Clarissa's eyes flashed. Julian, don't start with me. You married a clown, he spat, waving toward me. A nobody with a smart mouth. Hey, I said, at least I'm funny. You're just loud. Martin stood abruptly, his chair scraping. Enough. His voice boomed through the room like thunder. Julian, you will apologize properly, or I swear. But Julian cut him off, voice trembling with anger. You always do this, Dad. You humiliate me in front of everyone. You think he's better because he's calm and sarcastic, but he's just pretending to be perfect. Buddy, I said softly, if I were pretending to be perfect, I wouldn't have married into this circus. Clarissa groaned. Daniel. Sorry, I said, waving my hand. Just a reflex. Julian's face twisted, and for a second, I thought he might actually throw something. He glanced around, hands twitching, eyes wild. The meltdown was officially in full swing. You all think I'm stupid, he said, pacing faster now. You all laugh at me behind my back. Well, go ahead. Laugh. He grabbed his water glass and hurled it against the wall. It shattered dramatically, and Gloria shrieked like a Victorian widow. Julian. Martin roared. That's enough. Julian ignored him. No, it's not enough. You've all been waiting for this. For me to screw up, for Golden Boy Daniel to come out looking like the victim. I stood slowly, holding up both hands. Hey, I don't need to look like the victim. You're doing great work making me the hero all on your own. Clarissa whispered. Daniel, sit down. But I wasn't done. You accused me of stealing, Julian. You lied, got caught, and now you're smashing glass like it's performance art. You want forgiveness? Start with accountability. Don't lecture me, he shouted, voice cracking again. You're not part of this family. Finally, I said. Something we agree on. Martin slammed his hand down again, louder this time. Julian, apologize and get out before I lose what's left of my patience. Julian laughed bitterly, a sound that made even Gloria flinch. Apologize? To him? Never. He pointed at me again, shaking. He doesn't belong here. He's not one of us. You just like him because he reminds you of who you used to be, before money fixed your morals. Martin's eyes went cold. Watch your mouth. Julian smirked, desperate to land one more blow. You always cared more about appearances than your own son. Well, congrats. Now you've got a new one. That silence, sharp, cold, dangerous, lasted a full 10 seconds. Even the chandelier seemed to stop buzzing. Martin stared at him, his voice calm but lethal. Get out. Julian blinked. What? You heard me, Martin said. Get out. And don't come back until you learn the difference between pride and stupidity. Gloria gasped softly. Martin. No, Gloria, he said firmly. I've tolerated this long enough. He tried to destroy another man's reputation because his own ego couldn't handle being challenged. Julian's bravado cracked right there. You could see the panic behind his eyes. Dad, I didn't mean. Out. Martin repeated, pointing to the door. Julian hesitated, then turned his glare back on me. This isn't over. I smiled. You're right. I still haven't gotten dessert. Clarissa covered her face with both hands. Martin groaned, but I swear I saw the corner of his mouth twitch. Julian stormed out, muttering curses under his breath. The door slammed so hard the chandelier rattled again. The moment it clicked shut, the tension in the room broke like a snapped guitar string. Gloria immediately started dabbing at her eyes with a napkin. My poor boy. He's just under so much pressure. Yeah, I said. Pressure to behave like an adult. Tough adjustment. Clarissa elbowed me, whispering, stop. Martin poured himself another scotch, his movements slow and deliberate. Daniel, he said after a pause, you handled that better than I would have. Thanks, I said. Years of working with malfunctioning machinery prepared me for this. He's just louder and more expensive. That got a quiet laugh from one of the cousins. Gloria shot them a look, but didn't comment. Clarissa finally exhaled. Well, that was something. Yeah, I said, sitting back down. If something means a meltdown worthy of cable TV. Gloria wiped her eyes again. He's still my son. And I get that, I said. But maybe next time, he could come to dinner without turning it into a courtroom drama. Martin nodded in quiet agreement. He'll have to face the consequences. I won't tolerate this kind of behavior anymore. Consequences? I asked. Like therapy? Or a restraining order from all dinner tables within a 10-mile radius? Clarissa rolled her eyes. Daniel. What? I said, raising my hands. I'm offering ideas. The room finally began to relax. The cousins whispered and chuckled. Gloria ordered the staff to bring dessert to lighten the mood. Though honestly, even cheesecake couldn't sweeten the disaster that had just happened. When dessert arrived, I looked around at the remains of the chaos, broken glass, spilled wine, and the faint echo of Julian's tantrum, and couldn't help but smirk. "You know," I said, slicing into the cake, "I feel like we've bonded as a family tonight." Martin chuckled. "In a twisted way, yes." Clarissa leaned closer and whispered, "You do realize this is all going to be talked about for years, right?" "Good," I said. "Maybe they'll finally have a story worth telling that doesn't involve yachts and golf." She shook her head, but smiled. "You're impossible." "Maybe," I said, "but at least I'm innocent. And entertaining." By the time we left, Gloria had retreated to her room. Martin had poured himself one last drink, and the cousins had quietly declared it the best dinner in family history. Clarissa and I walked out into the cool night, the air finally quiet. In the car, she turned to me. "You didn't have to poke him so much." "Oh, I had to," I said. "It was public service. Some people need reminders that karma comes with a rewind button." She smiled, tired but amused. "You know, one day your sarcasm's going to get you in trouble." "Maybe," I said, grinning. "But tonight, it got me justice and cake." She laughed, really laughed this time. And as the headlights cut through the dark road home, I couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, chaos was my element. Because no matter how rich or ridiculous the hearts were, truth had a way of cutting through all the noise. And tonight, it did so with style, shattered glass, and a punchline. After Julian's grand exit, the mansion felt suspiciously peaceful, like the Wi-Fi signal of drama had finally dropped. Gloria retreated upstairs, mumbling about spiritual cleansing, and Martin poured what I'm pretty sure was his fourth scotch of the night. The cousins quietly left, whispering legendary as they passed me, which I'll admit, felt like applause. Clarissa and I stayed behind, finishing dessert in silence. The tension melted with the last spoon of tiramisu. She finally said, "You handled that way too well." I shrugged. "Experience. My family's crazy, too. They just don't wear it in designer labels." Martin looked up, eyes softer now. "Daniel, I owe you an apology." I smiled. "No need. Happens to everyone. My mom once accused me of stealing her slippers. Turns out the dog ate them. That actually got him to laugh." Gloria peeked back downstairs, frowned at the sound, and vanished again. Clarissa reached for my hand. "You were calm. I'm proud of you." "Thanks," I said. I figured someone had to represent the sane population. For the first time, dinner ended without me being the problem, and I left that house finally feeling like the joke wasn't on me. A week later, Karma sent an email. Martin called me personally, voice calm, tone final. "Son," he said, "I've made some decisions about the family business. Julian needs time to mature. You, on the other hand, have integrity." Translation: Julian's grounded, I got promoted. Turns out, Martin wanted someone trustworthy to oversee a few engineering contracts for his company. I didn't gloat. Okay, maybe internally I was dancing. Clarissa laughed when she found out. "You really did nothing and still won." "That's the secret," I told her. "Never wrestle with pigs. You both get dirty, but the pig enjoys it." Julian texted once, something vague about starting fresh. I replied with a thumbs-up emoji and haven't heard from him since. Now every time I show up to a family event, he mysteriously has other plans. Gloria pretends not to know why. Martin always greets me like a son, and Clarissa just squeezes my hand with that look that says, "You handled it your way." So, yeah, justice came quietly, wearing a smirk. And whenever anyone mentions that dinner, I just smile and say, "Ah yes, the night the thief caught himself."